For thousands of years, the Earth has quietly guarded its most unsettling secrets. Beneath deserts, forests, mountains, and forgotten valleys lie the remnants of civilizations that once thrived and then vanished without explanation. Ancient walls that should not exist. Cities built with knowledge that seems far beyond their time. Tombs filled with artifacts that challenge everything we thought we knew about the distant past. Archaeologists have spent centuries digging through the soil of history, searching for answers. And while they have uncovered remarkable discoveries, each revelation seems to raise even deeper questions. Why do some ancient structures display engineering precision that even modern builders struggle to replicate? How did early societies without modern tools, machinery, or advanced technology manage to create monumental architecture that has survived thousands of years? And, perhaps most unsettling of all, why were many of these remarkable places suddenly abandoned? Some historians argue that these mysteries are simply the result of lost techniques or misunderstood cultures. Others believe the truth may be far more complex, that ancient civilizations possessed knowledge that vanished with them, leaving behind only fragments for us to puzzle over. Across the world, scattered among remote landscapes and forgotten regions, lie archaeological sites that continue to defy clear explanation. Places where the stones themselves seem to whisper questions. Places where history feels incomplete. Places where the deeper we dig, the stranger the story becomes. Today, we begin our journey into one such mystery. Hidden deep within the arid hills of southern Spain lies the remains of an ancient settlement that has puzzled historians for generations. At first glance, it appears to be just another prehistoric village, one of many that dotted the European landscape thousands of years ago. But a closer look reveals something far more intriguing: towering defensive walls, complex passageways, carefully planned architecture, massive fortifications that seem far too sophisticated for the era in which they were built. This was not an ordinary settlement. This was Los Millares, and the mystery surrounding this ancient city still remains unsolved. The fortress of Los Millares, in the sun-scorched hills of southeastern Spain, where dry winds sweep across rocky plains and sparse vegetation clings to the earth, lies one of the most remarkable archaeological sites in Europe. The settlement of Los Millares sits near the confluence of two small rivers, the Andarax and the Rambla de Huechar, in what is now the province of Almería. Today the landscape is quiet and desolate, but nearly 5,000 years ago, this region was home to a thriving prehistoric community. At first glance, Los Millares might seem like just another ancient ruin. But the moment archaeologists began to study the site in detail, something became immediately clear. This was no ordinary village. The settlement dates back to roughly 3200 BC, during the Copper Age, a time when human societies across Europe were only beginning to experiment with metallurgy and agriculture. Most communities during this period lived in simple settlements composed of huts and small dwellings. Yet Los Millares appears to have been something entirely different. Spread across a plateau overlooking the valley below, the site once contained a complex network of homes, workshops, defensive walls, and burial grounds. The settlement itself covered nearly 20 hectares, an enormous size for a prehistoric community. But what truly astonished archaeologists was not just the size of the settlement, it was the defenses. Encircling the main village stood multiple rings of massive stone walls, some stretching several meters high and reinforced with towers and gates. These were not crude barriers hastily built for protection. They were carefully designed fortifications. The outer walls formed concentric defensive rings, creating a layered system of protection that would have made it extremely difficult for any attackers to reach the heart of the settlement. Watchtowers dotted the perimeter, providing elevated vantage points from which inhabitants could observe the surrounding landscape. Narrow entrances forced visitors to pass through controlled points, where defenders could easily monitor or block access. Even today, thousands of years later, the scale of the construction is impressive. But perhaps the most puzzling aspect of these fortifications is their age. At the time Los Millares was built, most European communities were small and relatively simple. Large-scale warfare and fortified cities were not yet common. So why would a prehistoric society invest so much effort into building such elaborate defenses? Who or what were they protecting themselves from? This question has puzzled archaeologists since the site was first excavated in the late 19th century. Some researchers believe the walls were built to defend against rival tribes competing for resources in the region. During the Copper Age, populations were growing, and access to fertile land and water sources would have been increasingly valuable. The valley below Los Millares would have offered ideal farmland for early agriculture. Control of this territory could have meant survival, but others argue that the defenses seemed far too extensive for such a simple explanation. The sheer labor required to build the walls would have demanded a highly organized society capable of coordinating large groups of workers. Stone blocks had to be quarried, transported, and carefully positioned. Towers had to be constructed. Gateways had to be engineered. This level of planning suggests that the inhabitants of Los Millares possessed an advanced understanding of architecture and logistics. For a community living more than 5,000 years ago, this is remarkable. Yet the mysteries of Los Millares extend far beyond its walls. Within the settlement itself, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of a surprisingly complex society. Excavations revealed clusters of circular houses built from stone foundations and mud brick walls. These homes were arranged in organized groups, forming what appear to have been neighborhoods within the larger settlement. Between the dwellings were open spaces that may have served as communal gathering areas or marketplaces. But perhaps the most fascinating discoveries were the workshops. Inside several structures, researchers found tools and debris associated with early metallurgy. Copper smelting furnaces and slag deposits indicate that the inhabitants of Los Millares were among the earliest metalworkers in Western Europe. This was a society experimenting with new technologies. The ability to smelt copper would have given them a significant advantage over neighboring communities that still relied primarily on stone tools. Metal weapons, metal tools, and metal ornaments would have been valuable trade items, and trade appears to have played a major role in the success of Los Millares. Archaeologists have discovered materials at the site that originated far beyond the local region. Stone tools made from exotic rock types, shell ornaments from distant coastlines, fragments of pottery with styles similar to those found hundreds of kilometers away. All of this suggests that Los Millares was connected to a wide network of trade routes that stretched across prehistoric Europe. But trade alone does not explain everything. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Los Millares lies just outside the settlement itself. Surrounding the city are dozens of ancient burial tombs known as Dolos tombs. These circular stone structures were used as communal burial chambers where the remains of multiple individuals were placed together, along with grave goods such as pottery, tools, and jewelry. Some tombs contain the remains of dozens of people. Others appear to have been reserved for individuals of higher status, accompanied by richer artifacts. The construction of these tombs was itself an impressive feat. Each burial chamber was carefully built using large stone slabs arranged into dome-like structures. Long corridors led into the chambers, creating passageways that may have held ceremonial significance. But the presence of so many tombs raises another question. Why would a prehistoric settlement devote so much effort to burial architecture? Some archaeologists believe the tombs reflect a deeply rooted spiritual or religious tradition. The inhabitants of Los Millares may have believed strongly in honoring their ancestors or preparing for an afterlife. Others suggest that the tombs were symbols of social hierarchy monuments designed to reinforce the power and status of certain families or leaders. Yet even after decades of research, many aspects of Los Millares remain unexplained. Why was the settlement built in such a heavily fortified form? Why did the society develop complex metallurgy and trade networks so early? And perhaps most puzzling of all, why was the site eventually abandoned? Sometime around 2200 BC, after centuries of prosperity, Los Millares was deserted. The once thriving settlement fell silent. The walls that had taken generations to build were left to crumble beneath the Spanish sun. No written records survive to explain what happened. There are no inscriptions, no documents, no surviving stories passed down through time, only ruins. Did climate change force the inhabitants to leave? Did rival communities eventually overcome the defenses? Or did something more complex unfold, something that modern archaeologists have yet to uncover? Today, as researchers continue to study the remnants of this ancient city, the mystery of Los Millares remains unsolved. Its walls still stand. Its tombs still guard the secrets of those who once lived there. And somewhere within those ancient stones, the story of a forgotten civilization still waits to be fully understood. The ancient city beneath the sands, Mehrgar, long before the rise of the great civilizations of Mesopotamia, long before the pyramids of Egypt reached toward the sky, and long before the cities of the Indus Valley flourished along the banks of mighty rivers, another community had already begun laying the foundations of human civilization. Hidden within the vast plains of what is now western Pakistan, near the rugged foothills of the Bolan Pass, lies one of the most important archaeological sites ever discovered in South Asia. Its name is Mehrgar, and its story stretches back more than 9,000 years. At first glance, the barren landscape surrounding the site seems almost inhospitable. The dry earth cracks under the relentless sun, and winds sweep across the plains carrying dust from distant mountains. It is not the kind of place where one might expect the earliest roots of civilization to have taken hold. Yet thousands of years ago, this region was very different. Seasonal rivers once flowed through the land, creating fertile pockets of soil where early communities could grow crops and raise animals. These conditions allowed one of humanity's earliest farming settlements to emerge long before the great cities of the ancient world. When archaeologists first began excavating Mehrgar in the 1970s, they expected to find a modest prehistoric village. What they uncovered instead was something far more remarkable. Layer upon layer of ancient occupation revealed that people had been living here continuously for millennia. Each layer told the story of a society slowly evolving from simple farming families into a complex and organized community. The earliest settlers of Mehrgar lived around 7000 BC, making the site one of the oldest known centers of agriculture anywhere on Earth. But what makes Mehrgar truly fascinating is not just its age. It is the evidence of innovation and sophistication found within its ancient ruins. Unlike many early human settlements, the inhabitants of Mehrgar did not simply build temporary shelters or crude huts. Instead, they constructed permanent homes made from carefully shaped mud bricks. These bricks were not random clumps of dried earth. They were standardized in size and shape, suggesting that the builders followed established construction techniques. Rows of rectangular houses were arranged in organized clusters, forming what appeared to be early neighborhoods. Some homes even contained multiple rooms, storage areas, and designated workspaces. This level of architectural planning is extraordinary for a settlement that existed nearly 9,000 years ago. But the structures themselves were only the beginning. Inside the buildings, archaeologists discovered tools and artifacts that paint a vivid picture of daily life in this ancient community. Stone blades used for cutting and harvesting crops, grinding stones for processing grains, clay vessels for storing food and water. All of these objects reveal a society that had already developed a stable agricultural lifestyle. The people of Mehrgar cultivated crops such as wheat and barley, which were among the earliest domesticated plants in human history. They also raised animals including sheep, goats, and cattle, making them some of the first known pastoralists in the region. The shift from hunting and gathering to farming marked one of the most important transformations in human history, and Mehrgar appears to have been at the very center of that transformation. But the discoveries at the site go even deeper. Among the most surprising findings were objects that suggest the people of Mehrgar possessed skills far beyond what scientists initially expected from such an early society. In several burial sites, archaeologists uncovered intricate jewelry made from stone beads, shells, and turquoise. Some beads were crafted with astonishing precision, drilled with tiny holes so they could be strung together as necklaces or ornaments. The craftsmanship required to produce such delicate objects indicates that specialized artisans existed within the community. This suggests a division of labor, hallmark of increasingly complex societies. Yet perhaps the most astonishing discovery at Mehrgar was something entirely unexpected: evidence of ancient dentistry. In several human skeletons excavated at the site, researchers discovered teeth that had been deliberately drilled using stone tools. These drilled teeth appear to have been an early attempt to treat tooth decay. The holes were carefully made, and microscopic analysis shows that the drilling occurred while the individuals were still alive. This means that the people of Mehrgar were practicing a primitive form of dental treatment nearly 7,000 years ago. Such a discovery challenges long-held assumptions about the capabilities of early human societies. How did these ancient people develop the knowledge and tools necessary to perform such delicate procedures? Was this knowledge passed down through generations of experimentation? Or did it arise from a deeper understanding of human anatomy than we typically associate with prehistoric cultures? As remarkable as these discoveries are, they raise another important question. How did a settlement like Mehrgar manage to grow and thrive in such an unforgiving environment? The answer may lie in its strategic location. The Bolan Pass, which lies nearby, has long served as a natural corridor connecting the highlands of Central Asia with the fertile plains of the Indus Valley. For thousands of years, traders, travelers, and migrating peoples have passed through this route. Mehrgar may have been positioned at a critical crossroads of ancient trade networks. Evidence found at the site suggests that the inhabitants were not isolated from the wider world. Certain materials discovered in the settlement, such as lapis lazuli and marine shells, originated from regions hundreds of kilometers away. These items likely arrived through early trade exchanges, connecting Mehrgar with distant communities. Trade would have brought not only goods but also ideas and technologies, and it is possible that this constant flow of interaction helped the settlement evolve into one of the most advanced communities of its time. But despite its success, the story of Mehrgar contains a mystery that archaeologists have struggled to explain. After thousands of years of continuous occupation, the settlement gradually declined. By around 2500 BC, the site appears to have been largely abandoned. The once busy homes fell silent. Workshops stopped producing tools and ornaments. Burial grounds were no longer used. Yet there is little evidence of a catastrophic event that might explain the sudden change. No signs of large-scale warfare, no evidence of widespread destruction, no clear indication of famine or disease. Instead, the decline of Mehrgar appears to have been a slow and gradual process. Some researchers believe environmental changes may have played a role. Shifts in climate could have reduced the availability of water and fertile land, making it increasingly difficult for the community to sustain itself. Others suggest that the inhabitants may have migrated eastward toward the fertile floodplains of the Indus River. Interestingly, this timeline coincides with the rise of one of the world's most famous ancient civilizations, the Indus Valley Civilization. Cities such as Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro would soon emerge as major urban centers, boasting advanced drainage systems, standardized brick construction, and complex urban planning. Many archaeologists believe that the cultural foundations of those later cities can be traced directly back to the early innovations seen at Mehrgar. In other words, Mehrgar may represent the earliest chapter in the long story of Indus Valley civilization. But even with this connection, many aspects of the site remain mysterious. How did such a sophisticated society develop so early in human history? What knowledge and traditions were passed down from generation to generation? And what forces ultimately led its people to abandon the settlement that had sustained them for thousands of years? Today, the quiet plains of Mehrgar offer few clues. The mud brick walls have long since eroded under centuries of wind and weather. The tools and ornaments that once filled the settlement now rest in museums and research laboratories. But beneath the layers of soil still lie countless fragments of a forgotten past. Each artifact, each buried structure, each ancient grave holds a small piece of the puzzle. A puzzle that researchers continue to study, hoping to understand how one of humanity's earliest civilizations rose from the dust of prehistory, and perhaps more importantly, what caused it to disappear. The tower in the northern seas, the Brock of Gurnus. Far to the north of mainland Europe, where the cold waters of the Atlantic crash against rocky shores and winds sweep endlessly across open fields, lies a remote group of islands known as Orkney. Today, the islands appear quiet and peaceful, scattered farms, grassy hills, and ancient stone ruins dotting the landscape. But thousands of years ago, this windswept archipelago was home to a thriving community whose architectural achievements continue to puzzle archaeologists. Among the many prehistoric sites found across Orkney, one structure stands apart, a towering circular fortress built entirely from stone. A monument that has endured nearly 2,000 years of storms, sea winds, and shifting tides. This remarkable structure is known as the Broch of Gurnus, and despite decades of research, the true purpose of this ancient tower remains one of the enduring mysteries of Iron Age Britain. The Broch of Gurnus sits on a narrow peninsula overlooking Einhallow Sound, a stretch of water that separates the Orkney mainland from the small island of Rousay. The site commands sweeping views across the surrounding sea, a strategic vantage point that would have allowed its inhabitants to observe approaching ships long before they reached the shore. At first glance, the brooch appears to be a massive circular tower rising from the earth. But the closer one looks, the more astonishing the construction becomes. The tower walls are built using a technique known as dry stone masonry, meaning the stones were stacked carefully without the use of mortar or binding material. Each block had to be precisely shaped and balanced against the others. Despite the absence of cement, the structure has remained standing for nearly 2 millennia. The outer walls measure roughly 4 meters thick, forming an incredibly strong defensive barrier. Within those walls lies a hollow interior chamber that once rose to an estimated height of more than 10 meters, making it one of the tallest structures in northern Britain during the Iron Age. But what truly sets Brochus apart from other ancient buildings is their internal complexity. Inside the thick outer walls are narrow staircases and hidden passageways that spiral upward to the structure. Small chambers and galleries are built directly into the walls themselves, creating a multi-level interior design that is surprisingly sophisticated for its time. These hidden spaces would have allowed inhabitants to move through the tower without being easily seen from outside. It is a design that suggests careful planning and advanced engineering knowledge. And yet, the people who built these towers lived nearly 2,000 years ago, long before modern construction techniques existed. Even today, historians still debate exactly how these brooches were constructed. The stones used to build the tower were not imported from distant quarries. Instead, they were gathered from the surrounding landscape. Workers would have needed to shape and transport thousands of heavy stones, stacking them carefully into place. Such an enormous project would have required a large workforce and strong leadership capable of organizing complex construction efforts. Which raises an important question. What motivated the builders of the Broch of Gurnus to undertake such a monumental task? The most widely accepted theory is that Broch served as defensive strongholds. During the Iron Age, communities in northern Britain were often vulnerable to raids from rival groups. Livestock, grain stores, and valuable goods could easily be stolen if settlements lacked adequate protection. A tall stone tower with thick defensive walls would have provided a secure refuge during times of conflict. From the top of the brochette, defenders could monitor the surrounding landscape and detect approaching enemies from great distances. If attackers attempted to enter the structure, the narrow entrances and internal passageways would have made it extremely difficult for large groups to break through. But while the defensive theory explains some aspects of the structure, it does not answer every question. For one thing, the Broch of Gurnus was not built in isolation. Surrounding the tower are the remains of an entire village. Excavations at the site have revealed dozens of smaller stone houses arranged in a ring around the central brochet. These homes were built from the same dry stone masonry used in the tower, suggesting they were constructed by the same community. The village would have housed a population of perhaps 100 people or more. Within the ruins of these homes, archaeologists discovered hearths, grinding stones, pottery fragments, and animal bones. These objects offer glimpses into the daily lives of the people who lived here nearly 2,000 years ago. They raised livestock. They farmed small plots of land. They cooked meals over open fires. They crafted tools from stone and bone. In many ways, life in the village may have been similar to that of other Iron Age communities scattered across northern Europe. Yet the presence of the towering brooch at the center of the settlement suggests something more complex was happening here. Some archaeologists believe the brooch served as the residence of a powerful local leader. In this interpretation, the tower was not simply a defensive structure, but also a symbol of status and authority. Living within the brooch would have set the ruling family apart from the rest of the community. The tower's height and strength would have served as a visible reminder of their power. This theory is supported by discoveries made during excavations inside the brooch itself. Among the artifacts found within the tower were items that appear to have been more valuable than those discovered in the surrounding houses. Decorative objects, finely crafted tools, and imported goods suggest that the brooch's inhabitants may have enjoyed a higher social status than others in the settlement. If this interpretation is correct, the Broch of Gurnus may have functioned as both a fortress and a seat of authority, but even this explanation leaves certain mysteries unresolved. One of the most puzzling aspects of the brooch is the sheer number of similar towers found across Scotland. More than 500 broches have been identified throughout northern Scotland and the surrounding islands. Most share the same basic design, circular stone towers with thick walls and internal chambers. Yet despite their similarities, each brooch also possesses unique architectural features. Some towers are larger, some include additional defensive walls. Others appear to have been expanded or modified over time. Why did Iron Age communities invest so much effort into building these structures? And why did this architectural style appear almost exclusively in northern Scotland? Another mystery involves the sudden decline of the broches. Archaeological evidence suggests that many the brooch of Gurness were eventually abandoned or destroyed. In some cases, towers appear to have collapsed after being damaged by fire. In others, the surrounding villages were gradually deserted. At Gurness, signs of occupation continue for several centuries after the brooch was built, but eventually the site fell into decline. The houses were no longer maintained. The tower itself began to deteriorate. The community that once thrived here slowly disappeared from the historical record. What caused this decline remains uncertain. Some historians believe that changes in political power during the later Iron Age may have weakened the authority of local leaders who once controlled these settlements. Others suggest that increased trade and cultural contact with the Roman Empire, which expanded into Britain during the 1st century AD, may have altered the social landscape of northern communities. It is also possible that environmental changes played a role. The harsh climate of the Orkney Islands has always posed challenges for agriculture. Even small shifts in weather patterns could have made it more difficult for communities to sustain themselves. Yet none of these explanations fully account for the disappearance of the brooch building culture. Today, the ruins of the brooch of Gurness remain one of the best preserved examples of Iron Age architecture in Europe. Visitors walking among the ancient stones can still trace the outlines of the village houses. They can step through the narrow entrance of the tower and imagine what life might have been like inside its massive walls. But despite centuries of study, the brooch still guards many of its secrets. Who were the people who first conceived of this remarkable architectural design? How did they develop the skills necessary to construct such durable structures? And why did this unique building tradition eventually fade away? The winds that blow across the Orkney coastline carry no answers. Only the silent stones of the brooch remain standing watch over the northern seas, just as they have for nearly 2,000 years. A monument to a civilization whose story is still only partially understood. The walls that should not exist, Rajgir's cyclopean fortress across the plains of northern India, surrounded by rugged hills and dense forests, lies a landscape steeped in ancient legend. For thousands of years, travelers, pilgrims, and rulers have passed through this region, leaving behind traces of civilizations that once flourished here. At the heart of this historic landscape lies the ancient city of Rajgir. Today, Rajgir is a quiet town in the Indian state of Bihar, visited mostly by tourists and religious pilgrims who come to explore its sacred temples and historic sites. But beneath the peaceful appearance of the modern town lies a far older story, one written in stone. Encircling the hills around Rajgir are the remains of a massive defensive structure known as the Cyclopean Walls of Rajgir. These ancient walls stretch for nearly 40 kilometers, winding across hills, valleys, and rocky terrain. Built from enormous stones stacked carefully on top of one another without mortar, the walls appear almost fused into the landscape itself. At certain points, the stones are so large that they weigh several tons. Standing before these towering formations, one cannot help but wonder how such a monumental structure was created, especially considering the time period in which it was built. Archaeologists believe the walls date back to around the 6th century BC, possibly even earlier. This would place their construction during a time when iron tools were only just beginning to spread across the Indian subcontinent. Heavy machinery, cranes, and advanced engineering techniques did not exist. Yet somehow, ancient builders managed to transport and position thousands of massive stones across miles of uneven terrain. The stones themselves are irregularly shaped, but they have been fitted together with remarkable precision. Some sections appear almost puzzle-like, where each stone interlocks with those surrounding it. This construction method is known as cyclopean masonry, a term originally used to describe similar structures found in ancient Greece and Italy. The name comes from the mythical Cyclopes, giant one-eyed beings from Greek mythology, who were said to possess incredible strength. Early historians believed that only creatures of such immense power could have moved stones of this size. Of course, modern archaeologists do not believe giants built the walls of Rajgir, but the scale of the construction remains astonishing. How did ancient workers transport these stones across the rugged hills? How were they lifted and positioned so precisely? And perhaps most puzzling of all, why were the walls built in the first place? To understand the mystery of Rajgir's Cyclopean walls, we must first understand the city they were built to protect. In ancient times, Rajgir was known as Rajagriha, which translates roughly to the House of Kings. It served as the capital of the powerful Magadha kingdom, one of the most influential political powers in ancient India. Magadha would later become the core of several great empires, including the Mauryan Empire, which unified much of the Indian subcontinent during the 3rd century BC. But long before those empires emerged, Rajagriha was already an important center of political and cultural activity. The city was nestled within a natural valley surrounded by 5 rocky hills, Baipula, Ratnagiri, Udayagiri, and Sonagiri. These hills provided natural protection, making the location ideal for a fortified capital. Yet the ancient rulers of Rajagriha did not rely on natural defenses alone. They constructed an enormous stone wall that followed the contours of the surrounding hills, effectively enclosing the entire valley. This defensive barrier would have created a powerful fortress capable of protecting the city from invading armies. At least, that is the traditional explanation. But some historians believe the story may be more complicated. For one thing, the sheer scale of the walls seems excessive for the needs of a single city. 40 kilometers of stone fortification would have required enormous resources and manpower. Thousands of laborers would have needed to quarry, transport, and stack the massive stones. Such an undertaking would likely have taken many years, perhaps even decades, to complete. Why would an ancient kingdom invest so much effort into a defensive structure of this magnitude? Some scholars believe the walls were built gradually over multiple generations, expanding as the city grew in size and importance. Others suggest the walls may have served purposes beyond simple defense. The layout of the structure is unusual. Rather than forming a compact ring around the city center, the walls extend across wide areas of rugged terrain, sometimes climbing steep hills or descending into narrow valleys. In certain sections, the walls appear to follow routes that are difficult to explain from a purely defensive perspective. Why build fortifications along such challenging terrain? Was the goal truly military protection, or did the walls serve another purpose? Some researchers believe the walls may have functioned as territorial markers, defining the sacred or political boundaries of the ancient capital. In this interpretation, the massive structure would not simply have kept enemies out, it would have symbolized the authority and power of the rulers who controlled the land within. Others suggest the walls may have been tied to religious or spiritual traditions. Rajgir holds deep significance in both Buddhist and Jain history. According to historical texts, the Buddha himself spent time teaching in the hills surrounding the city. Ancient monasteries and meditation caves still exist in the area, many of them carved directly into the rock. Some scholars believe the walls may have been constructed to protect sacred sites or pilgrimage routes that passed through the region. But even if the purpose of the walls can be partially explained, the methods used to build them remain deeply puzzling. The stones used in the construction are not small, manageable blocks. Many weigh several tons. Transporting them would have required an enormous workforce and careful coordination. Ancient builders may have used wooden rollers, ropes, and earthen ramps to move the stones into position. Yet even with such techniques, the scale of the construction remains staggering. Modern engineers studying the walls have noted the remarkable stability of the structure. Despite standing for more than 2,000 years, many sections of the walls remain intact. The builders clearly understood how to distribute weight and balance stones in ways that allowed the structure to endure centuries of weather and erosion. This suggests that the people responsible for the walls possessed advanced knowledge of stone construction. But where did this knowledge come from? Was it developed locally by the builders of Magadha, or was it influenced by architectural traditions from other ancient cultures? Some historians have pointed out that similar Cyclopean masonry techniques appear in several parts of the ancient world, from Mycenaean Greece to the massive stone walls of South America. However, there is no clear evidence that these civilizations were directly connected. Could it simply be that different cultures independently developed similar solutions to the challenges of large-scale stone construction? Or is there a deeper story waiting to be uncovered? Adding to the mystery is the fact that the Cyclopean walls of Rajgir appear to have been built in multiple phases. Different sections of the wall display variations in construction style and stone arrangement. Some areas use larger stones stacked in irregular patterns. Others show more refined craftsmanship, with stones fitted more tightly together. This suggests that the walls may have been expanded or modified over time. Different rulers may have contributed to the structure, adding new sections as the city grew or as new defensive needs arose. But eventually, the walls fell into neglect. By the time later empires rose to power in the region, Rajagriha had already begun to lose its importance. The political center of Magadha shifted to a new city, Pataliputra, located along the banks of the Ganges River. As the capital moved, Rajgir gradually declined. Without a thriving city to maintain them, the massive walls slowly deteriorated. Sections collapsed. Vegetation began to grow between the stones. Over centuries, parts of the structure became buried beneath layers of soil and debris. Today, the Cyclopean walls remain scattered across the hills surrounding Rajgir. Some sections still stand tall, their enormous stones stacked just as they were thousands of years ago. Other parts lie in ruins, barely visible beneath the encroaching forest. To walk along these ancient stones is to step into a forgotten chapter of history, a chapter that raises more questions than answers. Who first conceived the idea of building such an immense structure? How did ancient workers manage to move stones weighing several tons across the rugged hills? And why did the rulers of Rajagriha believe such a monumental wall was necessary? Even after centuries of study, the full story of Rajagriha's Cyclopean walls remains incomplete. The stones endure, but the secrets of those who built them are still waiting to be uncovered. The forgotten kingdom of the jungle, Sambor Pre Kuk, deep within the dense forests of central Cambodia, far from the famous temples that attract millions of visitors each year, lies a place that few travelers ever see. Hidden among towering trees, tangled vines, and the quiet sounds of the jungle are the ruins of an ancient city, one that once served as the heart of a powerful kingdom. Its name is Sambor Pre Kuk, and although it predates the legendary temples of Angkor by centuries, its story remains one of the most mysterious chapters in Southeast Asian history. Today, the jungle has largely reclaimed the site. Moss grows across crumbling bricks, tree roots twist around ancient walls, and sunlight filters through the thick canopy above. At first glance, it may appear as though these structures have simply been swallowed by time. But once, nearly 1,500 years ago, this quiet forest was the center of a thriving civilization. Sambor Pre Kuk was the capital of the Chenla Kingdom, an early state that flourished in the region during the 6th and 7th centuries AD. Long before the Khmer Empire rose to power and built the monumental temples of Angkor, the rulers of Chenla governed vast territories across mainland Southeast Asia. Their capital city stood here, in what is now Cambodia's Kampong Thom province. Archaeologists believe the ancient city was known as Isanapura, a name that appears in inscriptions dating back to the early medieval period. But for centuries, the location of this lost capital remained unknown. It was not until the 20th century that researchers began to uncover the true scale of the ruins hidden beneath the forest. What they found was astonishing. Spread across a wide area of jungle are the remains of nearly 100 temples, built from carefully crafted red bricks. These structures form several clusters scattered across the landscape, each containing towers, sanctuaries, and ceremonial buildings. Unlike the towering stone temples of Angkor, which were built centuries later, the temples of Sambor Pre Kuk were constructed primarily from brick and laterite. At first glance, the design appears simple, but a closer look reveals an incredible level of craftsmanship. The bricks were shaped and fired with remarkable precision, allowing builders to create walls with almost seamless joints. In some areas, the bricks fit together so tightly that it is difficult to insert even a thin blade between them. What is perhaps most puzzling is the fact that many of these bricks were assembled without visible mortar. Instead, the builders seem to have used an unknown bonding technique that has puzzled archaeologists for decades. Some researchers believe a natural adhesive may have been used, one that has long since deteriorated with time. Others suspect the bricks were pressed together while still warm, allowing them to fuse more tightly as they cooled. Yet despite years of study, the exact method used by these ancient builders remains uncertain. And the mysteries of Sambor Pre Kuk extend far beyond its construction techniques. The layout of the temples themselves raises intriguing questions. Rather than forming a single central complex, the structures are arranged in separate groups, connected by ancient pathways that once cut through the forest. Each cluster appears to have served a specific ceremonial or religious purpose. Some temples are square with towering central sanctuaries. Others are octagonal, a design rarely seen in ancient architecture. The octagonal temples are particularly intriguing. Their unusual shape has led some researchers to speculate that they may have held special symbolic or ritual significance. But without clear historical records explaining their purpose, the true meaning behind these designs remains uncertain. Many of the temples are decorated with intricate carvings. Stone lintels above doorways display scenes of Hindu mythology, including images of deities such as Shiva, Vishnu, and Indra. These carvings suggest that the people of Chanla practiced forms of Hindu worship, influenced by cultural and religious traditions that had spread from India across Southeast Asia. Yet there are also signs that other spiritual traditions may have existed alongside Hindu beliefs. Archaeologists have discovered statues and artifacts that hint at early forms of Buddhist influence, suggesting that the religious landscape of the region may have been more complex than previously believed. Perhaps the most intriguing mystery of Sambor Pre Kuk involves its relationship to the later Khmer Empire. Several centuries after the decline of the Chenla kingdom, the Khmer rulers would construct the monumental temples of Angkor structures that remain among the largest religious buildings ever created. Many historians believe the architectural innovations seen at Sambor Pre Kuk may have laid the foundation for the grand temples that followed. Techniques for brick construction, temple design, and religious symbolism may all have evolved from the earlier traditions developed here. In other words, Sambor Pre Kuk may represent an important precursor to Angkorian civilization. But despite its historical importance, many aspects of the site remain poorly understood. One reason for this is the lack of written records. Unlike later Khmer temples, which often contain detailed inscriptions describing the kings who built them and the rituals performed there, the temples of Sambor Pre Kuk contain relatively few surviving texts. Some inscriptions in ancient Khmer have been discovered, but they offer only limited clues about the daily life of the city's inhabitants. This absence of written evidence leaves archaeologists with many unanswered questions. How large was the city that once surrounded these temples? How many people lived here? What role did the temples play in the political and spiritual life of the Chenla kingdom? And perhaps most importantly, why did the city eventually fall into decline? Historical sources suggest that the Chenla kingdom began to fragment during the 8th century AD. Political divisions may have split the once unified state into rival factions. At the same time, new centers of power were emerging in other parts of Southeast Asia. As influence shifted, the importance of Isanapura gradually faded. The capital moved elsewhere, trade routes changed, and slowly, the once great city of Sambor Pre Kuk was abandoned. Without maintenance, the temples began to deteriorate. The jungle crept inward. Roots pushed through brick walls. Roofs collapsed. Over centuries, the forest covered nearly everything. By the time European explorers began mapping Southeast Asia during the colonial era, the ruins had been largely forgotten. Local villagers knew of the ancient temples hidden in the forest, but few outsiders had any idea of the site's true significance. Even today, large portions of Sambor Pre Kuk remain unexplored. Dense vegetation still hides structures that archaeologists have yet to fully document. New discoveries continue to emerge as researchers carefully clear sections of the jungle. Each excavation reveals more clues about the civilization that once flourished here. Yet every discovery also raises new questions. Why did the builders choose such unusual architectural designs? What religious rituals took place inside the octagonal temples? And how did the people of Chanla develop the advanced construction techniques used in these structures? Standing among the ruins today, it is difficult not to feel a sense of mystery. The jungle is quiet. Bird calls echo through the trees. Ancient brick towers rise unexpectedly from the forest floor, their surfaces weathered by centuries of rain and heat. They are reminders of a time when this place was alive with activity, when priests performed sacred ceremonies, rulers governed their kingdom, and artisans crafted the temples that still stand today. Yet the civilization that created Sambor Prey Cook has long since disappeared. The city's streets are gone, its markets and homes have vanished, and the people who once called this place their capital have faded into history. What remains are the temples, silent witnesses to a forgotten kingdom hidden deep within the Cambodian jungle, a kingdom whose full story may never be completely known. The Mound of the Hostages, secrets beneath the hill of Tara, across the rolling green countryside of Eastern Ireland, rises a hill that has been steeped in legend for thousands of years. Known as the Hill of Tara, this quiet landscape may appear unremarkable at first glance, just another grassy hill among many that dot the Irish countryside. But for centuries, Tara has been regarded as one of the most sacred and mysterious places in Irish history. According to ancient traditions, this was once the seat of the High Kings of Ireland, a place where rulers were crowned and where political power was believed to flow from the land itself. Yet long before kings ruled here, long before written records began to document Ireland's past, something else had already been built upon this hill. At the heart of Tara stands one of the oldest monuments in the entire region, a structure known as the Mound of the Hostages. Unlike the towering castles or churches that came much later in Irish history, the Mound of the Hostages is a low, circular earthen mound. From a distance, it may seem like nothing more than a small hill rising gently from the surrounding fields. But beneath its grassy surface lies a burial chamber that has remained intact for more than 5,000 years. Archaeologists believe the mound was constructed around 3000 BC, during the Neolithic period, a time when farming communities were spreading across Ireland and Europe. This means the monument is older than Stonehenge, older than the Great Pyramids of Egypt, and older than nearly every written record of human civilization. Despite its modest appearance, the Mound of the Hostages holds secrets that continue to puzzle historians and archaeologists alike. The mound measures roughly 15 meters in diameter and stands several meters high. Beneath the mound lies a narrow stone passage that leads into a small burial chamber built from massive slabs of stone. The chamber itself is surprisingly well preserved. The walls are constructed from large upright stones, carefully arranged to form a stable enclosure. Above them, flat stone slabs create a roof that has protected the interior from collapse for thousands of years. At the entrance of the passage stands a large decorated stone. Carved into its surface are mysterious symbols, spirals, zigzag patterns, and circular motifs that appear in many ancient Irish monuments. These carvings are part of a broader tradition of Neolithic art, found at several prehistoric sites across Ireland and Britain. But their exact meaning remains unknown. Some researchers believe the patterns may have had spiritual or symbolic significance. Others suggest they might represent astronomical or seasonal cycles that were important to early farming communities. But no one can say for certain what the ancient builders intended when they carved these designs into the stone. Inside the chamber, archaeologists discovered the remains of multiple human burials. Over time, the mound was used as a burial site for dozens of individuals. Some were cremated, their ashes placed carefully inside the chamber. Others appear to have been buried with grave goods, small pottery vessels, ornaments, and tools that may have held ritual or symbolic meaning. The presence of these artifacts suggests that the mound was not simply a burial site, but a place of ceremony and ritual. The people who constructed it likely believed the mound held spiritual importance. But perhaps the most fascinating feature of the Mound of the Hostages is its astronomical alignment. The narrow passage leading into the chamber is positioned so that during specific times of the year, particularly around the Samhain and Imbolc festivals, which occur in early November and early February, the rising sun shines directly into the burial chamber. For a brief moment during sunrise on these days, sunlight travels down the passage and illuminates the interior stones. This alignment cannot be accidental. It required careful observation of the sun's movements across the horizon and precise positioning of the structure. In other words, the builders of the mound possessed a sophisticated understanding of astronomy. But why would ancient people align a burial monument with the rising sun? Some archaeologists believe the alignment may have symbolized a connection between the cycle of life and death. The rising sun could represent rebirth, renewal, or the transition of the soul into the afterlife. In many ancient cultures, the movement of celestial bodies held deep spiritual significance. By aligning the burial chamber with the sun, The builders of the mound may have been expressing a belief that the deceased were somehow connected to the cosmic cycles of nature. Others believe the alignment may have marked important seasonal events. For early farming communities, the changing seasons were critical for survival. Knowing when to plant crops or prepare for winter could mean the difference between prosperity and famine. Monuments like the Mound of the Hostages may have served as ancient calendar markers, helping communities track the passage of time. Yet the mysteries surrounding the monument do not end there. The name Mound of the Hostages comes from medieval Irish legends that describe the Hill of Tara as a place where kings from rival territories were forced to give hostages as a pledge of loyalty to the High King of Ireland. According to these stories, hostages were held at Tara to ensure peace between rival clans. However, these legends were written thousands of years after the mound was constructed. There is no archaeological evidence suggesting that the mound itself was used to imprison hostages. In reality, the name likely reflects later interpretations of a monument whose original purpose had long been forgotten. By the time medieval storytellers began recording Ireland's history, the true origins of the mound had already faded into myth. Another intriguing aspect of the site is its relationship to the broader Tara complex. The Hill of Tara contains several other ancient earthworks and ceremonial enclosures, including structures known as the Ring of the Kings, the Royal Enclosure, and the mysterious Liel Fayil, or Stone of Destiny. Some historians believe these monuments formed part of a large ceremonial landscape that evolved over thousands of years. Different cultures may have used the hill for different purposes, first as a sacred burial ground, later as a center of political power and ritual. If this interpretation is correct, the Mound of the Hostages may represent the earliest phase of Tara's long history. It may have been built by a prehistoric community that regarded the hill as a place of spiritual significance. Later societies may have inherited these sacred traditions, transforming the site into a royal ceremonial center. But even with decades of archaeological research, many questions remain unanswered. Who were the people who built the mound? What beliefs motivated them to construct such a carefully aligned burial monument, and why did they choose the Hill of Tara as the location for such an important structure? One possibility is that the hill held symbolic significance long before the mound was built. Its elevated position provides sweeping views across the surrounding countryside. For ancient communities, such locations often carried spiritual meaning. High places were sometimes believed to bring humans closer to the sky, the sun, and the divine forces of nature. Another possibility is that Tara was already an important meeting place for early communities. Seasonal gatherings, ceremonies, or trade exchanges may have occurred here long before the mound was constructed. If that were the case, building a burial monument at this location could have reinforced the hill's importance as a sacred center. Today, the Mound of the Hostages remains one of Ireland's most fascinating prehistoric monuments. Visitors can still enter the narrow stone passage and step inside the ancient chamber where generations of people were laid to rest thousands of years ago. The air inside is cool and still. The stones that form the chamber walls have endured countless winters, storms, and centuries of silence. Outside, the green hills of Tara stretch across the Irish landscape, just as they did 5,000 years ago. And yet, despite everything that has been discovered about this ancient monument, its deepest secrets remain hidden. The identities of the people buried here are unknown. Their beliefs, their rituals, and their understanding of the cosmos remain largely a mystery. But one thing is certain: whoever built the Mound of the Hostages possessed knowledge, skills, and spiritual traditions that were far more advanced than we once believed. And beneath the quiet hill of Tara, their story still waits, carved into stone and illuminated only briefly by the rising sun. The royal tombs of Alakahuyuk, in the rolling plains of central Turkey, far from the crowded cities and busy highways of the modern world, lies an ancient mound that has captivated archaeologists for nearly a century. From a distance, the mound appears unremarkable, just another gentle rise in the Anatolian landscape. But beneath its layers of soil lies the remains of one of the most intriguing archaeological sites of the Bronze Age. This is Alakahuyuk. And hidden within this ancient settlement are tombs so unusual, so richly furnished, and so mysterious that they have forced historians to reconsider what they know about the early civilizations of Anatolia. The site of Alakahuyuk sits in the region once inhabited by the Hatti, an ancient people who lived in central Anatolia long before the rise of the powerful Hittite Empire. For thousands of years, this land served as a crossroads between east and west. Traders, travelers, and migrating peoples passed through its valleys, bringing with them new technologies, cultural traditions, and ideas. It was in this environment that the settlement of Alakahuyuk first emerged. Archaeological evidence suggests that the site was inhabited as early as the 4th millennium BC, making it one of the oldest continuously occupied locations in the region. Over centuries, the settlement grew into an important center of trade and culture, but it was not until excavations began in the early 20th century that the true significance of the site became clear. In the 1930s, Turkish archaeologists uncovered a series of royal tombs buried beneath the ancient mound. What they found inside those tombs was astonishing. Unlike the simple burials commonly found in many prehistoric sites, the graves at Alakahuyuk were filled with elaborate artifacts crafted from bronze, gold, silver, and precious stones. Weapons, jewelry, ceremonial objects, and beautifully decorated vessels were arranged carefully beside the deceased. Some tombs contained the remains of multiple individuals, suggesting that they may have belonged to members of an elite ruling class. But among the most striking discoveries were a group of objects unlike anything archaeologists had seen before. These were the famous sun discs of Alakahuyuk, crafted from bronze and adorned with intricate geometric patterns, animal figures, and circular motifs. The sun discs appear to have been ceremonial standards mounted on poles. Their exact purpose remains unknown. Some researchers believe they may have been carried in religious processions or used during important rituals. Others suggest they could have symbolized the power of the ruling class or represented celestial forces such as the sun and the stars. Whatever their purpose, the craftsmanship of these objects is extraordinary. Each disc displays delicate metalwork carefully shaped into symmetrical designs that reflect a deep understanding of both art and metallurgy. Creating such objects would have required skilled artisans and advanced techniques for working with metal. This alone suggests that the society responsible for these tombs possessed a level of technological sophistication that was remarkable for its time. But the mysteries of the royal tombs extend far beyond their artifacts. One of the most puzzling aspects of the burials is the presence of animal sacrifices. In several tombs, archaeologists discovered the skeletons of bulls, deer, and other animals placed alongside the human remains. The animals appear to have been sacrificed as part of the burial ritual. Their bodies were carefully arranged within the graves, sometimes positioned near ceremonial objects or offerings. Why would animals be included in these tombs? Some historians believe the sacrifices were meant to accompany the deceased into the afterlife, providing them with food, protection, or symbolic power. In many ancient cultures, animals held spiritual significance and were believed to serve as guides or guardians in the journey beyond death. Others suggest the sacrifices may have represented displays of wealth and status. Killing valuable livestock during a funeral ceremony would have demonstrated the power and resources of the ruling family. But even with these interpretations, the precise meaning of these rituals remains unclear. Another mystery lies in the construction of the tombs themselves. The graves were built using stone-lined chambers covered with wooden beams and layers of earth. Some chambers were carefully arranged to accommodate multiple burials, suggesting that they may have been reopened and reused over time. Yet despite the age of the site, the craftsmanship of these tombs indicates that the builders possessed considerable architectural knowledge. They understood how to construct stable underground chambers capable of supporting the weight of the soil above. They also demonstrated a clear awareness of ritual space, arranging the artifacts and remains in ways that suggest deliberate symbolic meaning. But perhaps the most intriguing question surrounding Alakahuyuk is this: who exactly were the people buried in these royal tombs? The artifacts found in the graves indicate that the individuals were members of a powerful elite. Their wealth, status, and ceremonial objects suggest that they may have belonged to a ruling class within the Hatti civilization. Yet the Hatti themselves remain one of the most mysterious cultures of the ancient world. Unlike later civilizations such as the Hittites, who left behind written records and inscriptions, the Hatti culture left relatively few written documents. Most of what we know about them comes from archaeological discoveries and references in later Hittite texts. According to these sources, the Hatti people inhabited central Anatolia before the arrival of Indo-European-speaking groups who eventually formed the Hittite Empire. The Hittites adopted many aspects of Hatti culture, including religious traditions and ceremonial practices. This means that the tombs at Alaka-Hoyuk may represent a cultural bridge between two major civilizations. But despite decades of research, many aspects of the site remain unresolved. For example, the exact political structure of the society that built the tombs is still unclear. Were the individuals buried here kings, priests, or powerful clan leaders? Did they rule over a centralized kingdom, or were they part of a network of smaller city-states? The lack of written records makes it difficult to answer these questions. And then there is the matter of the sudden disappearance of the royal burial tradition. The tombs at Alaka-Hoyuk date primarily to the early Bronze Age, around 2500 BC. After this period, the elaborate burial practices seen in these tombs seem to vanish from the archaeological record. Later settlements in the region do not display the same level of ceremonial wealth or ritual complexity. What caused this change? Did the ruling elite lose their power? Did political upheaval reshape the society? Or did new cultural influences alter the burial traditions of the region? Some historians believe that shifts in trade networks may have played a role. Central Anatolia was an important hub for early trade routes connecting Mesopotamia, the Mediterranean, and the Caucasus. If these trade routes changed or declined, the economic foundation of the society may have weakened. Others suggest that migrations or conflicts with neighboring groups could have disrupted the social order. Yet without written records, the true cause remains uncertain. Today, visitors to Alaka-Hoyuk can walk among the ruins of the ancient settlement. Stone gates decorated with carved sphinxes mark the entrance to the archaeological site remnants of a later Hittite occupation. Nearby, the reconstructed tombs and artifacts provide a glimpse into the mysterious world of the Bronze Age rulers who once lived here. The sun discs now displayed in museums continue to fascinate researchers and visitors alike. Their intricate designs hint at beliefs and traditions that have long since been lost to history. Who were the people who crafted these extraordinary objects? What rituals did they perform beneath the Anatolian sky thousands of years ago? And why did their culture eventually fade from the historical record? For now, the royal tombs of Alaka-Hoyuk remain one of the most enigmatic archaeological discoveries of the ancient world. A silent testament to a civilization that flourished, created wonders, and then vanished, leaving behind only fragments of its story buried beneath the soil of Anatolia. The stones that watch the sun, the cairns of Clava. In the northern reaches of Scotland, where mist drifts slowly across the hills and ancient forests whisper with the wind, there lies a place that has puzzled historians and archaeologists for generations. It sits quietly along the banks of the River Nairn, not far from the city of Inverness. At first glance, it may appear to be nothing more than a cluster of old stones arranged in circles across a grassy field. But these stones are far older than they seem. They have stood here for nearly 4,000 years, long before the rise of castles, kingdoms, or even written history in this land. This mysterious site is known as the Clava Cairns, and despite centuries of study, the purpose of these ancient structures remains one of the most intriguing mysteries of prehistoric Britain. The Clava Cairns are believed to date back to the Bronze Age, around 2000 BC. During this period, communities across the British Isles were transitioning from the Neolithic age of early farming into a new era marked by metalworking, trade, and expanding cultural connections. Yet even in this changing world, the people who built the cairns left behind monuments that appear deeply connected to ancient traditions of ritual and burial. The site itself consists of 3 large cairns, each surrounded by rings of standing stones. A cairn, in simple terms, is a mound of stones built to cover a burial chamber. But the cairns at Clava are far more elaborate than typical burial mounds. Each structure is carefully designed with a central stone chamber accessible through a narrow passageway. Around these chambers stand circles of large standing stones, some rising several meters above the ground. What makes the Clava cairns particularly fascinating is the remarkable precision of their layout. The stones surrounding the cairns are not placed randomly. Instead, they form carefully arranged circles that appear to follow deliberate patterns. In fact, archaeologists have discovered that the entire site was constructed with a clear awareness of the surrounding landscape and the movements of the sun. One of the most striking features of the clavicairns is their alignment with the winter solstice. During the shortest days of the year, when the sun hangs low on the horizon, its light shines directly through the entrance passage of the central cairn. For a brief moment at sunset, the golden light travels along the stone passage and illuminates the burial chamber inside. This phenomenon is remarkably similar to the famous alignment seen at Newgrange in Ireland, another prehistoric monument built thousands of years ago. The fact that both structures display such precise solar alignments suggests that ancient communities across the British Isles possessed sophisticated knowledge of astronomy. But why would the builders of Clava design their burial monuments to align with the setting sun? Some researchers believe the alignment may have symbolized the connection between the sun and the cycle of death and rebirth. In many ancient cultures, the sun represented renewal and the continuation of life. By aligning the burial chamber with the winter solstice sunset, the moment when the sun begins its return after the darkest days of the year, the builders may have been expressing a belief that death was not an end, but part of a cosmic cycle. The dead, perhaps, were believed to journey with the sun into the afterlife. Others believe the alignment may have served a more practical purpose. For early agricultural societies, tracking the movements of the sun was essential for understanding seasonal changes. The winter solstice marked a turning point in the year, signaling that longer days would soon return. Monuments like the clavicairns may have functioned as ceremonial markers of these important seasonal events, yet even if the solar alignment explains part of the design, it does not fully account for the unusual features found at the site. One of the most intriguing aspects of the clavicairns is the gradual change in stone size and color within the circles surrounding the cairns. In several cases, the tallest stones are positioned at the southwestern side of the circle, while shorter stones appear on the opposite side. Additionally, the stones themselves vary in color, ranging from reddish sandstone to lighter shades of granite. Some archaeologists believe this variation may have been intentional. The builders may have arranged the stones in ways that reflected the path of the sun across the sky, or symbolized different stages of life or time. Another possibility is that the stones held ritual significance tied to spiritual beliefs that we no longer fully understand. Adding to the mystery is the fact that the cairns appear to have been used for cremation burials. Excavations within the chambers revealed small deposits of cremated human remains, along with fragments of pottery and simple grave goods. Unlike the elaborate royal tombs seen in other ancient civilizations, the burials at Clava appear relatively modest. This suggests that the cairns may not have been reserved for kings or powerful elites. Instead, they may have served as burial sites for members of a local community, yet the effort required to construct these monuments was enormous. Transporting and positioning the massive standing stones would have required a coordinated workforce. The precise alignment with the solstice suggests that the builders carefully studied the movement of the sun across the horizon. Clearly, the cairns were not simply casual burial mounds. They were monuments built with purpose and intention. But the most perplexing question surrounding the clavicairns is this: why were they built in this specific location? The site lies within a landscape rich with other prehistoric monuments. Nearby are ancient standing stones, burial mounds, and ceremonial enclosures dating back thousands of years. Some archaeologists believe this region may have formed part of a larger ritual landscape where different monuments serve different ceremonial functions. Communities may have gathered here during important seasonal events, performing rituals that connected them to the cycles of nature. The cairns may have been only one part of a broader spiritual system that once dominated the region. Yet another mystery lies in the abandonment of the site. Archaeological evidence suggests that the cairns were actively used for a limited period before falling into disuse. After a few centuries, the burial chambers were no longer reopened, and the site gradually faded from active cultural memory. Why this happened remains unclear. It is possible that shifts in religious beliefs or cultural practices led communities to abandon older burial traditions. As societies evolved and new ideas spread across the British Isles, older monuments may have lost their significance. But even after the cairns were no longer used for burial, the stones themselves remained standing. For centuries, they quietly observed the passage of time. Medieval farmers passed by them while working their fields. Travelers walked along nearby paths, perhaps unaware of the ancient rituals that once took place here. Local folklore eventually grew around the site. Some legends claimed the stones were enchanted or connected to supernatural forces. Others believed they were remnants of a forgotten people who once possessed mysterious knowledge of the stars. In modern times, the Clava cairns have attracted the attention of historians, archaeologists, and visitors fascinated by ancient mysteries. Careful excavations and scientific studies have revealed many details about the construction and use of the site. Yet despite these discoveries, the deeper meaning behind the cairns remains elusive. We know the stones were placed with extraordinary precision. We know the builders understood the movements of the sun and the rhythms of the seasons. We know they invested enormous effort into constructing monuments that would endure for thousands of years. But what beliefs inspired them to do so? What rituals were performed within the shadow of these stones during the long winters of prehistoric Scotland? And what stories were told about the people buried within the cairns? Standing among the stones today, one cannot help but feel a sense of connection to the distant past. The circles remain quiet and still, just as they have for millennia. Each winter solstice, as the sun dips low over the horizon, its light once again enters the ancient passage, just as it did 4,000 years ago, just as the builders intended. And yet the meaning behind that moment of light remains one of the enduring mysteries of the ancient world. The stone city of the Thracians, the mystery of Perperikon, high in the rugged Rhodol mountains of southern Bulgaria, lies a vast complex of ancient ruins carved directly into the stone of a hilltop. From a distance, the rocky plateau appears like a natural fortress rising above the surrounding valleys. But as visitors approach, the landscape begins to reveal something extraordinary. Stone stairways cut into the rock, walls carved from the mountainside itself, massive terraces overlooking the valleys below. What seems at first to be a natural formation slowly reveals itself to be something far older and far more mysterious. This is Perperikon, one of the most enigmatic archaeological sites in southeastern Europe. For thousands of years, people have built, worshipped, and ruled from this rocky summit. Civilizations rose and fell here long before written history began to record their stories. And even today, archaeologists are still trying to understand what this place truly was and why it held such significance for so many ancient cultures. The site of Perperikon sits roughly 470 meters above sea level, commanding sweeping views of the surrounding landscape. From this elevated position, it would have been possible to see approaching travelers or armies from miles away. But the hill's importance was not simply strategic. For ancient peoples, high places often carried deep spiritual meaning. Mountains and hilltops were seen as locations where the earth met the sky, places where humans might communicate with the divine. Perperikon appears to have been one such sacred place. Archaeological evidence suggests that the earliest activity at the site dates back to around 5000 BC, during the Neolithic period. At that time, prehistoric communities living in the region began to carve small altars and ritual spaces into the exposed rock. These early structures were simple, but they hint at a long tradition of religious activity that would continue for thousands of years. Over time, the site expanded. By the Bronze Age, the hilltop had become an important center for the Thracians, an ancient group of tribes who inhabited much of southeastern Europe. The Thracians were known for their fierce warriors, skilled metalworkers, and elaborate religious traditions. Yet despite their influence, relatively little written history survives about their culture. Most of what we know about the Thracians comes from archaeological discoveries, and from references made by Greek and Roman writers who encountered them. According to these sources, the Thracians worshipped a variety of gods and practiced complex rituals involving music, dance, and sacrifice. Some historians believe that Perperikon may have served as a major religious sanctuary dedicated to one of the most important Thracian deities. The most intriguing evidence for this theory lies at the very center of the site. Carved directly into the rock is a large open chamber known today as the Temple of Dionysus. This name comes from ancient Greek writings that describe a powerful oracle dedicated to Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, and prophecy, somewhere in the mountains of Thrace. The historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BC, described a temple where priests delivered prophecies similar to those of the famous Oracle of Delphi. Some scholars believe that Perperikon may have been the very location Herodotus described. At the center of the temple lies a large circular altar carved into the rock. Nearby are several stone basins and channels that appear to have been used for collecting liquid offerings. Some researchers believe these basins may have held wine during ritual ceremonies, which would align with the worship of Dionysus. Others suggest the basins may have been used in sacrificial rituals involving animals, or perhaps even humans. If Perpericon truly served as a major religious sanctuary, it may have drawn pilgrims from across the region. People seeking guidance, blessings, or prophecies may have traveled long distances to consult the priests who lived and worked here. But Pericon was not only a religious center. As centuries passed, the site evolved into a fortified city. Massive walls were constructed along the edges of the plateau, creating a strong defensive perimeter. Stone staircases and narrow passageways connected different levels of the complex, allowing inhabitants to move easily through the rocky terrain. Excavations have uncovered the remains of homes, storage rooms, water cisterns, and administrative buildings. At its height, Perpericon may have supported a population of several thousand people, yet the architecture of the city remains unusual. Unlike many ancient cities built with carefully cut blocks of stone, much of Pericon was carved directly from the bedrock of the mountain. Rooms, corridors, and stairways were cut into the stone itself. This approach created a city that was both durable and closely integrated with the natural landscape. But carving such an extensive complex from solid rock would have required enormous effort and skill. Ancient workers would have spent years chiseling away at the stone using simple tools made of bronze or iron. The scale of the construction suggests that the builders possessed not only technical knowledge, but also strong political or religious motivation. Something about this place was important enough to justify such labor. Yet the true purpose of many structures within the city remains unclear. Some rooms appear to have served as living quarters. Others may have functioned as ceremonial halls or meeting spaces. A large rectangular chamber discovered near the summit may have been used as a palace for local rulers or high-ranking priests. But perhaps the most puzzling aspect of Perpericon is the variety of cultures that occupied the site over time. After the Thracians, the city came under the influence of the Romans, who expanded the settlement and strengthened its fortifications. Later still, during the Byzantine period, new buildings and churches were constructed on the hill. Each civilization left its mark on the site, adding new structures while repurposing older ones. This continuous occupation makes it difficult for archaeologists to determine exactly which parts of the complex belong to which era. Layers of history overlap across the plateau, blending together into a complex puzzle that researchers are still trying to unravel. And then there is the mystery of the city's eventual abandonment. Despite centuries of activity, Perpericon was eventually deserted. Historical records suggest that the city may have been destroyed or abandoned during the Ottoman invasions of the Balkans in the late medieval period. But by that time, the site had already lost much of its former importance. Trade routes had shifted, political centers had moved elsewhere. The once bustling city slowly faded into obscurity. Over time, the buildings collapsed and the hilltop was reclaimed by nature. For centuries, the ruins of Perpericon remained largely forgotten. Local villagers knew of the ancient stones, but few outsiders recognized their historical significance. It was not until the late 20th century that large-scale archaeological excavations began to reveal the true extent of the site. Today, Perpericon is recognized as one of the most important ancient complexes in southeastern Europe. Yet despite decades of excavation, many questions remain unanswered. Was the Temple of Dionysus truly located here? Did priests once deliver prophecies from this rocky summit? What rituals were performed in the basins carved into the stone? And why did so many civilizations choose to build upon the same mysterious hill? Standing atop the plateau today, surrounded by the ruins of ancient walls and temples, it is easy to understand why this place held such fascination for those who came before. The view stretches endlessly across the mountains and valleys. The wind moves quietly through the stones, and beneath your feet lies the carved rock of a city that has watched thousands of years pass. A city whose deepest secrets may still be hidden within the mountain itself. The endless lines of stone, the mystery of Carnac, along the quiet coast of Brittany, France, where the Atlantic Ocean rolls steadily against sandy shores and grassy plains stretched toward the horizon, lies one of the most astonishing prehistoric landscapes on Earth. At first glance, the countryside near the small town of Carnac appears peaceful and ordinary. Fields of green grass spread across the landscape, dotted with occasional farmhouses and quiet rural roads. But hidden among these fields stands a site that has puzzled travelers, historians, and archaeologists for centuries. Thousands of enormous standing stones arranged in long, perfectly ordered rows. Stretching across several kilometers of land, these ancient stones form one of the largest and most mysterious megalithic complexes ever constructed. This is the Karnak alignments, and even after more than 100 years of research, the true purpose behind these extraordinary structures remains unknown. The Karnak alignments consist of more than 3,000 standing stones, also known as menhirs. These stones range in size from small blocks barely taller than a person to massive monoliths rising over 4 meters high. The stones are arranged in long, parallel lines that extend across the countryside. In some places, the rows stretch for nearly 1 kilometer, forming patterns that are visible even from aerial photographs. The entire complex is divided into several major sections, including the Menek, Kermario, and Kurliskan alignments. Each group contains hundreds of stones carefully positioned in straight lines. But perhaps the most intriguing feature of the site is the precision with which these stones were arranged. The rows appear to follow specific orientations across the landscape, suggesting that their placement was deliberate rather than random. Yet the builders of Karnak lived more than 6,000 years ago, during the Neolithic period. This was a time when communities relied on stone tools, early farming methods, and simple technologies. There were no metal tools capable of cutting stone easily, no machinery to transport massive blocks across long distances, no written records explaining why such an enormous project was undertaken. And yet somehow, ancient builders managed to quarry, transport, and erect thousands of massive stones across a vast stretch of land. How they accomplished this remains one of the greatest puzzles in prehistoric archaeology. Researchers believe the stones were likely transported using a combination of wooden rollers, ropes, and human labor. Teams of workers may have dragged the stones across the ground using sledges made from wood. But even with these methods, moving such enormous stones would have required an immense amount of effort. For example, some of the larger stones weigh several tons. Positioning them upright in the ground would have required careful planning and coordination. Workers would have needed to dig deep holes, position the stones upright using ropes and leverage, and then pack soil and smaller stones around the base to secure them. Completing a single row of stones might have taken weeks or even months. Constructing the entire complex would likely have required generations of labor, which raises a fundamental question. Why would a prehistoric community invest such enormous effort into building these alignments? One of the earliest theories proposed by archaeologists suggested that the stones formed part of a massive astronomical observatory. Some researchers noticed that certain rows appear to align roughly with the direction of the rising or setting sun during specific times of the year. If this interpretation is correct, the stones may have served as markers for tracking important solar events such as solstices and equinoxes. For early agricultural societies, understanding the changing seasons was essential for survival. Planting crops too early or too late could lead to disaster. Monuments like the Karnak alignments may have functioned as enormous calendars, helping communities observe the passage of time and predict seasonal changes. However, this theory has not fully explained the complexity of the site. Not all rows of stones align with obvious astronomical events. In some cases, the orientations appear inconsistent or irregular. Another possibility is that the stones were part of a vast ritual landscape. Many prehistoric monuments across Europe appear to have been constructed for ceremonial purposes. Stone circles, burial mounds, and standing stones often appear in locations associated with spiritual or cultural significance. Karnak may have served as a gathering place where ancient communities came together for rituals, celebrations, or seasonal festivals. The rows of stones might have marked sacred pathways or ceremonial processions. Participants may have walked between the towering stones during important events, creating a dramatic setting for religious or cultural gatherings. But even this interpretation leaves many questions unanswered. The scattered site is enormous. With more than 3,000 stones spread across several kilometers, the alignments represent one of the most ambitious construction projects of the Neolithic era. Such an undertaking would have required not only manpower, but also strong leadership and social organization. Who coordinated the construction of the stones? Was there a powerful leader or priesthood directing the project? Or did multiple communities collaborate over generations to create the complex? Some archaeologists have suggested that the stones may have marked territorial boundaries or ancient travel routes. The alignments could have served as landmarks guiding travelers across the landscape. Yet the deliberate patterns and spacing of the stones suggest something more symbolic than practical. Adding to the mystery is the presence of other prehistoric structures scattered around the Karnak region. Nearby are dozens of dolmens, which are stone burial chambers built from large slabs of rock. There are also tumuli, or burial mounds, as well as smaller stone circles. Together, these monuments form a vast network of prehistoric sites that appear to be connected in ways we do not yet fully understand. Some researchers believe Karnak may have been the center of a broader, sacred landscape, where different types of monuments serve different spiritual purposes. The alignments may have been only one part of a much larger ceremonial system. Another intriguing aspect of the site is the variation in stone size along the rows. In several alignments, the stones appear tallest at one end and gradually decrease in size as the rows continue. This gradual change may have been intentional. Some scholars believe it could represent symbolic ideas related to hierarchy, progression, or cosmic order. Others believe the arrangement might reflect stages in a ritual journey. Participants walking along the alignments might have experienced a gradual transition as they moved from one end of the rows to the other. Yet without written records, the true meaning behind the stones remains uncertain. And, as with many ancient monuments, local legends have emerged to explain the mystery. According to one popular story, the stones were once a Roman army that was turned into stone by a powerful saint. Another legend claims the stones were giants who were frozen in place by magic. While these stories are clearly mythological, they reflect a long tradition of wonders surrounding the site. Even centuries ago, people recognized that the Karnak stones represented something extraordinary. But perhaps the most intriguing mystery surrounding Karnak is the question of its builders. The Neolithic people who erected these stones left behind no written language. We do not know their names. We do not know the stories they told about the monuments they created. What we do know is that these communities possessed a deep understanding of their environment. They understood how to organize large groups of workers. They understood how to shape and transport massive stones. And they clearly believed the effort required to build these alignments was worthwhile. But why? What belief system inspired them to create such an enormous monument? Was it tied to astronomy? To religion? To social identity? Or to something else entirely? Today, the Karnak alignments remain one of the most mysterious prehistoric sites in the world. Tourists walk among the stones, marveling at their scale and wondering about their origins. Researchers continue to study the site using modern tools such as aerial surveys, satellite imagery, and ground-penetrating radar. Yet despite all these efforts, the deeper meaning behind the stones continues to elude us. Thousands of years have passed since the first builders placed these stones into the earth. Civilizations have risen and fallen, empires have come and gone, but the rows of Karnak still stand quietly in the fields of Brittany, endless lines of stone stretching toward the horizon. Silent witnesses to a mystery that may never be fully solved. The Canyon of the Ancients, the mystery of Chaco Canyon. In the vast desert of the American Southwest, where endless stretches of red sandstone mesas rise beneath an open sky, there exists a place that once served as the heart of a remarkable ancient civilization. Today, the region appears quiet and remote. Winds sweep through narrow canyons, and the silence of the desert stretches for miles in every direction. Yet more than 1,000 years ago, this landscape was home to one of the most sophisticated cultural centers in prehistoric North America. Hidden within the rugged terrain of northwestern New Mexico lies the remarkable archaeological complex known as Chaco Canyon. To the untrained eye, the scattered ruins of stone walls and collapsed buildings may appear to be little more than remnants of abandoned settlements. But when archaeologists began studying the site in detail, they discovered something extraordinary. Chaco Canyon was not simply a village. It was a massive ceremonial and administrative center, built with a level of planning and precision that rivals the great cities of the ancient world. The first evidence of human activity in Chaco Canyon dates back thousands of years. Early hunter-gatherer groups moved through the region long before permanent settlements appeared, but it was around 900 AD that the canyon began to transform into something far more ambitious. During this time, a culture known as the ancestral Puebloans, sometimes referred to as the Anasazi, began constructing monumental buildings across the canyon floor. Over the next 2 centuries, they would create a network of structures that still astonishes archaeologists today. At the heart of the complex stood enormous buildings known as great houses. The largest and most famous of these structures is called Pueblo Bonito. From above, Pueblo Bonito appears as a massive semicircular building enclosing an open plaza, but its true scale becomes clear only when one walks among its ruins. At its height, the building contained over 600 rooms spread across multiple stories. Some walls rose as high as 5 stories, making Pueblo Bonito one of the largest structures in North America before the arrival of Europeans. Constructing such a building would have required an enormous amount of labor. Thousands of sandstone blocks were quarried from nearby cliffs and transported across the canyon floor. Each stone had to be shaped carefully and stacked into walls using mortar made from mud and sand. Even more impressive is the fact that the builders used wooden beams to support the ceilings of the rooms. But trees capable of producing beams of this size did not grow in Chaco Canyon. Researchers have determined that the timber used in the buildings was transported from mountain forests located over 70 kilometers away. This means that ancient workers had to cut down massive trees, carry them across rugged terrain, and haul them into the canyon. All of this was accomplished without wheeled vehicles or draft animals. Why would a society invest so much effort into building such monumental structures in the middle of the desert? That question has puzzled researchers for decades. But Chaco Canyon contains even more surprises. Scattered around the great houses are large, circular structures known as kivas. Kivas were ceremonial rooms used by Puebloan communities for religious gatherings and rituals. Most kivas were relatively small, but Chaco Canyon contains several enormous versions known as great kivas. These structures measure up to 20 meters in diameter, with carefully constructed stone walls and benches lining the interior. At the center of each kiva lies a small hole called a sipapu, which represents the place where ancestral spirits were believed to have emerged from the underworld. The presence of these large ceremonial structures suggests that Chaco Canyon served as a major spiritual center for the surrounding region. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the canyon is the network of roads that extends outward from the site. Archaeologists have discovered that Chaco Canyon was connected to distant settlements by a system of carefully constructed roads. Some of these roads stretch for hundreds of kilometers, crossing deserts, climbing mesas, and cutting through rugged terrain. Unlike ordinary paths formed by foot traffic, many of these roads are remarkably straight. In some places, they cut directly through obstacles rather than curving around them. Researchers have even discovered sections where the builders carved stairways into cliffs to maintain the road's straight path. Why were these roads constructed? One possibility is that they served as trade routes, allowing goods to move between Chaco Canyon and surrounding communities. Artifacts discovered at the site support this idea. Archaeologists have found turquoise, seashells, macaw feathers, and copper bells items that originated far beyond the local region. These objects suggest that Chaco Canyon was part of an extensive trade network connecting cultures across the American Southwest and even into Mesoamerica. Yet the roads themselves appear too large and carefully constructed to have been used solely for trade. Some archaeologists believe they may have served ceremonial purposes. The roads could have functioned as sacred pathways used during religious processions or pilgrimages. Communities from across the region may have traveled along these routes to participate in rituals held at Chaco Canyon. This interpretation is supported by another remarkable feature of the site, its astronomical alignments. Several structures within Chaco Canyon appear to be carefully aligned with the movements of the sun and moon. One of the most famous examples is known as the Sun Dagger. Located atop a nearby mesa called Fajada Butte, the Sun Dagger consists of 3 stone slabs positioned near a spiral-shaped petroglyph carved into the rock. During the summer solstice, a beam of sunlight passes between the stones and creates a dagger-like shape that pierces the center of the spiral. At other times of the year, different patterns of light mark the changing seasons. This suggests that the people of Chaco Canyon possessed detailed knowledge of astronomy. They understood how to track the movements of celestial bodies and incorporated that knowledge into the design of their structures. Such observations may have played an important role in their spiritual beliefs and ceremonial calendar. Yet, despite all this evidence of planning, organization, and cultural importance, Chaco Canyon's history contains a profound mystery. After flourishing for more than 200 years, the site was gradually abandoned. By around 1150 AD, construction had stopped. The great houses were no longer maintained. The roads fell into disuse, and the people who once gathered in the canyon began to move away. Why did this remarkable civilization disappear? One possible explanation involves climate change. Studies of tree rings from the region indicate that a prolonged drought occurred during the 12th century. If rainfall decreased significantly, agriculture in the canyon would have become extremely difficult. Without reliable crops, sustaining a large population would have been nearly impossible. But drought alone may not explain everything. Some researchers believe that social or political changes may have contributed to the decline. As trade networks shifted and regional power structures changed, the importance of Chaco Canyon may have diminished. Communities that once relied on the canyon as a ceremonial center may have developed new traditions or relocated to more fertile areas. Evidence suggests that many of the descendants of the ancestral Puebloans eventually settled in regions such as Mesa Verde and along the Rio Grande. Yet the precise reasons behind the abandonment of Chaco Canyon remain uncertain. Today, the ruins of the great houses still stand beneath the desert sun. Visitors walking through the canyon can see the massive walls of Pueblo Bonito rising above the sandy ground. They can step inside ancient kivas where ceremonies were once held. And they can gaze across the desert landscape where the great roads once stretched toward distant horizons. But despite decades of research, the full story of Chaco Canyon remains incomplete. Who were the leaders who organized such ambitious construction? What rituals took place within the great kivas? And why did a civilization capable of building such extraordinary structures eventually leave them behind? The canyon itself offers no answers, only silent ruins beneath the wide desert sky. Reminders of a culture whose achievements continue to inspire wonder, and whose disappearance remains one of the great mysteries of ancient America. The desert city of the dead, the mystery of Petra, in the harsh desert landscape of southern Jordan, where towering cliffs of rose-colored sandstone rise dramatically from the earth, lies one of the most extraordinary archaeological sites ever discovered. Hidden deep within a network of narrow canyons, protected by natural barriers of rock and sand, stands a city that appears almost unreal. Monumental facades carved directly into the cliffs, temples and tombs sculpted from living stone, stairways leading to forgotten sanctuaries high above the desert floor. This ancient city is known as Petra, and despite its fame today, the full story of the people who built it and how they managed to create such an astonishing place remains filled with mystery. Petra lies within a rugged mountain valley that was once part of an important network of ancient trade routes. Caravans carrying spices, incense, textiles, and precious goods traveled across the deserts of Arabia and the Near East for centuries. At the crossroads of these routes stood Petra, a city that would become one of the wealthiest and most powerful centers of commerce in the ancient world. The city was built by a people known as the Nabateans, an Arab civilization that flourished between the 4th century BC and the 2nd century AD. Yet, for many years, historians knew very little about the Nabateans. Unlike civilizations such as the Romans or Egyptians, the Nabateans left behind relatively few written records describing their society. What we know about them comes primarily from the ruins they left behind, and Petra is by far the most spectacular of those ruins. Approaching Petra is an experience unlike visiting almost any other ancient site. The main entrance to the city lies at the end of a narrow canyon known as the Shik. This natural passage stretches for more than a kilometer, its towering walls rising nearly 80 meters above the ground. As visitors walk through the twisting canyon, the rock walls seem to close in around them. Sunlight filters down through the narrow opening above, illuminating the red and orange hues of the sandstone. Then suddenly, the canyon opens, and one of the most famous monuments in the world comes into view. Carved directly into the cliff face stands the magnificent facade known as Al-Khazne, or the Treasury. Standing nearly 40 meters tall, the structure resembles a grand temple with towering columns, intricate carvings, and statues that appear to emerge from the rock itself. Yet despite its elaborate appearance, the Treasury is not a freestanding building. It is carved entirely from the sandstone cliff. Ancient workers began at the top of the rock face and carefully chiseled their way downward, sculpting the facade from a single solid wall of stone. This technique required extraordinary precision. A single mistake could have damaged the entire structure, but the treasury is only the beginning. Beyond the Sick lies an entire city carved into the cliffs and spread across the desert valley. More than 800 monuments have been identified at Petra, including tombs, temples, houses, and ceremonial structures. Some are simple chambers carved into the rock. Others display elaborate facades decorated with columns, stairways, and sculpted figures. Among the most impressive structures is the monastery, known locally as Ad Dare. This massive monument stands nearly 50 meters wide and 45 meters tall, carved high into the cliffs above the valley floor. Reaching it requires climbing more than 800 stone steps carved into the mountainside. Like the treasury, the monastery appears to have been carved from the rock using simple tools such as chisels and hammers. Yet the scale and precision of the structure suggest that the Nabateans possessed highly advanced stoneworking skills. But Petra's most remarkable achievements may not be visible at first glance. Beneath the surface of the city lies a sophisticated water management system that allowed the Nabateans to thrive in one of the driest environments on Earth. The region surrounding Petra receives very little rainfall. Without a reliable source of water, sustaining a large population would have been nearly impossible. Yet, the Nabateans developed an ingenious network of dams, channels, pipelines, and reservoirs that captured and stored rainwater. Stone channels carved into the canyon walls directed water from flash floods into storage tanks. Clay pipes carried water throughout the city. Large underground cisterns ensured that water remained available even during long dry seasons. This system allowed Petra to support a population of perhaps 20,000 people, a remarkable achievement for a desert city. But despite their ingenuity and wealth, the Nabateans remain a mysterious civilization. Where did they come from? How did they develop the engineering knowledge necessary to build such a complex city? And why did they choose to carve their monuments directly into the rock instead of constructing traditional buildings? Some historians believe the Nabateans may have originally been nomadic traders who gradually settled in the region. Their familiarity with desert travel would have given them a strategic advantage along the caravan routes connecting Arabia with the Mediterranean world. By controlling these routes, the Nabateans could collect taxes and fees from passing merchants. Over time, this trade brought immense wealth to Petra. Artifacts discovered at the site reveal connections with cultures across the ancient world. Roman coins, Egyptian pottery, Greek-style sculptures, and Arabian inscriptions all appear among the ruins. Petra was not an isolated desert settlement. It was a vibrant crossroads where ideas, goods, and traditions from many civilizations came together. But even the wealth of trade could not guarantee the city's survival. In 106 AD, the Roman Empire annexed the Nabatean kingdom, incorporating Petra into the Roman province of Arabia. Under Roman rule, the city continued to prosper for a time. New buildings were constructed, including a large theater capable of seating thousands of spectators. Roman architectural styles began to appear alongside the earlier Nabatean designs. Yet gradually, Petra's importance began to fade. One major reason was the shifting of trade routes. As maritime trade across the Red Sea and Mediterranean became more common, overland caravan routes lost some of their importance. Merchants who once passed through Petra began choosing faster sea routes instead. Without the steady flow of trade, the city's economic foundation weakened. Another factor may have been natural disasters. Historical records mention a powerful earthquake that struck the region in 363 AD. The earthquake damaged many buildings and disrupted the city's water systems. Although some repairs were made, Petra never fully recovered its former glory. By the early medieval period, much of the city had been abandoned. Sandstorms and shifting desert winds gradually buried many structures. For centuries, Petra was largely forgotten by the outside world. Local Bedouin tribes knew of the ruins, but few outsiders ventured into the remote valley. It was not until 1812, when a Swiss explorer named Johann Ludwig Burckhardt rediscovered the site, that Petra began to capture global attention once again. Disguised as a local traveler, Burckhardt managed to convince a guide to take him to the hidden ruins. When he first glimpsed the treasury emerging from the canyon walls, he realized he had stumbled upon one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries in history. Today, Petra is recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the most famous ancient cities in the world. Millions of visitors travel through the Sikh each year to witness the grandeur of the Nabatean capital. Yet even with modern technology and decades of research, many questions about Petra remain unanswered. How did the Nabateans develop such advanced engineering techniques in such a harsh environment? What religious beliefs inspired the construction of the monumental tombs carved into the cliffs? And how many secrets still lie buried beneath the desert sands? Because even today, large portions of Petra remain unexplored. New tombs and structures continue to be discovered beneath layers of sand and rock. Hidden chambers may still exist within the cliffs, waiting to reveal new clues about the mysterious civilization that once ruled this desert city. For now, Petra stands as one of the most remarkable achievements of the ancient world. A city carved from stone, a crossroads of civilizations, and a testament to human ingenuity in one of the most unforgiving landscapes on Earth. Yet despite its beauty and grandeur, the full story of Petra and the people who built it remains one of history's greatest mysteries. The underground world, the lost city of Derinkuyu beneath the dry plains of central Turkey, hidden deep below the surface of the Earth, lies one of the most astonishing engineering achievements of the ancient world. From the outside, there is nothing remarkable about the small town of Derinkuyu. The landscape is quiet and unassuming, rolling hills, scattered homes, and fields that stretch across the region of Cappadocia. But directly beneath this peaceful landscape exists a vast underground labyrinth, a city carved into the soft volcanic rock, a city capable of sheltering tens of thousands of people. This is the underground city of Derinkuyu, and even today, archaeologists continue to struggle with the mystery of how and why such a massive subterranean complex was built. The underground city remained largely hidden for centuries. Local residents had long been aware of small caves and storage chambers beneath their homes, but the full extent of the underground network was not discovered until 1963. According to local accounts, a man renovating his house knocked down a wall in his basement and discovered a hidden passage leading into the rock. Curious, he followed the passage deeper underground. What he found was astonishing. The passage opened into a network of tunnels, rooms, and stairways that stretched far beneath the surface. Further exploration revealed that the tunnels connected to an enormous underground city extending down through multiple levels. Today, archaeologists estimate that Derinkuyu contains at least 18 underground levels, reaching depths of more than 60 meters below the surface. Only a portion of the city has been fully excavated and open to visitors, but even the explored sections reveal a complex and carefully designed environment. The underground chambers include living quarters, storage rooms, kitchens, wineries, wells, stables for animals, and even large communal spaces that appear to have been used for gatherings or religious ceremonies. At the heart of the city lies a large ventilation shaft, which extends from the deepest levels all the way to the surface. This shaft provided fresh air to the inhabitants of the underground city. Without such ventilation, life beneath the earth would have been impossible. Yet the builders of Derinkuyu clearly understood how to design an air circulation system that allowed thousands of people to survive underground for extended periods. But ventilation was only one of many challenges the builders had to solve. Another crucial problem was security. The narrow tunnels connecting different sections of the city were designed with defensive features that could block invaders. At certain points along the tunnels, enormous circular stone doors were installed. These doors resemble giant stone wheels, sometimes weighing several hundred kilograms. In times of danger, inhabitants could roll these massive stones across the passageways, sealing off entire sections of the underground city. Once the doors were in place, attackers would have found it nearly impossible to break through. This defensive design suggests that Derinkuyu may have served as a refuge during times of conflict. When enemies approached, entire communities could retreat underground, bringing their livestock, supplies, and belongings with them. The hidden entrances to the city would have made it difficult for outsiders to locate the underground refuge. But this raises an important question. Who were the people who built Derinkuyu? And why did they invest such enormous effort into constructing an entire city beneath the earth? Some historians believe the earliest parts of the underground complex may date back as far as the 8th century BC, possibly built by the Phrygians, an ancient civilization that once inhabited central Anatolia. The Phrygians were known for their advanced stone carving techniques, and they built impressive monuments throughout the region. Because Cappadocia's landscape consists largely of soft volcanic rock known as tuff, it can be carved relatively easily with simple tools. This may have made the area ideal for constructing underground spaces. However, the city did not remain unchanged. Over the centuries, new groups expanded and modified the tunnels. During the Byzantine period, between the 5th and 10th centuries AD, the underground city appears to have been used extensively by early Christian communities. Historical records suggest that Christians in the region sometimes faced persecution from invading forces. The underground cities of Cappadocia, including Derinkuyu, and nearby complexes like Kamakalime, have served as safe havens where people could hide for extended periods. Inside Derinkuyu, archaeologists have discovered several chambers believed to have functioned as churches or religious spaces. Some rooms contain simple stone altars carved into the walls. Others include seating areas where groups may have gathered for worship or teaching. These discoveries support the theory that the underground city was not merely a temporary refuge, but a place where people could continue their daily lives even while hidden beneath the earth. Food storage was another essential component of life underground. Large storage rooms carved into the rock were used to hold grain, oil, wine, and other supplies. Some chambers appear to have functioned as kitchens, complete with stone hearths where food could be prepared. Other rooms served as wineries, where grapes could be pressed and fermented. This suggests that inhabitants expected to remain underground for significant periods of time, but even with these facilities, living underground would have been challenging. The tunnels are narrow and often steep. Some passageways are barely wide enough for a single person to pass through. Without modern lighting, the underground environment would have been illuminated only by oil lamps or torches. Yet the complexity of the city's design suggests that its builders carefully planned how each space would be used. The deeper levels of the city contain storage areas and water wells. Living quarters and communal spaces appear on higher levels. Ventilation shafts and wells ensured access to fresh air and water even during extended periods underground. Some researchers estimate that Derinkuyu could have sheltered up to 20,000 people, along with their animals and supplies. If this estimate is correct, it would make Derinkuyu one of the largest underground settlements ever constructed. Yet despite its remarkable design, many aspects of the city remain mysterious. For example, how long did it take to carve such an enormous complex? Even with the relatively soft volcanic rock, excavating hundreds of rooms and kilometers of tunnels would have required enormous effort. Generations of workers may have contributed to the project over centuries. Another mystery involves the hidden entrances. Many of the tunnels connecting to the surface are small and easily concealed. Some are located within ordinary houses or natural rock formations. This suggests that the city was designed with secrecy in mind. But if the underground city served as a refuge, what kind of threats were its builders trying to escape? Throughout history, the region of Cappadocia has witnessed invasions by various groups, including Persians, Romans, Arabs, and Mongols. The underground cities may have been used repeatedly by different communities seeking protection from conflict. Yet the original motivation behind the construction of Derinkuyu may have been even older. Another fascinating aspect of the underground complex is the presence of long tunnels connecting it to other underground cities. Researchers have discovered that Derinkuyu is linked to nearby settlements through passageways that extend for several kilometers. These connections suggest that the underground cities of Cappadocia may have formed part of a larger network. Communities could move between cities without ever emerging onto the surface. This raises the possibility that the region once supported a vast underground infrastructure designed for survival in times of danger. Yet despite decades of exploration, large portions of Derinkuyu remain unexplored. Collapsed tunnels and unstable chambers prevent archaeologists from fully mapping the entire complex. Hidden passages may still exist beneath the rock, waiting to reveal new sections of the city. Standing at the entrance to Derinkuyu today, it is difficult to imagine the world that once existed beneath the surface. But descending into the tunnels quickly changes that perspective. The air grows cooler, the passageways grow darker, and the carved walls reveal the extraordinary effort required to create such a place. An entire city built underground. a refuge carved from stone, a testament to the determination and ingenuity of the people who once lived here. Yet the deeper mystery remains. Why was such a massive underground world necessary? What dangers drove entire communities to seek shelter beneath the earth? And how many other secrets remain hidden in the rock beneath Cappadocia? Even today, Derinkuyu continues to challenge our understanding of the ancient world, a hidden city beneath the soil, waiting for its full story to finally come to light. The city above the clouds, the mystery of Machu Picchu, high in the rugged Andes Mountains of Peru, where jagged peaks rise through drifting clouds and deep valleys cut through the landscape below, lies one of the most famous and mysterious archaeological sites on Earth. Perched on a narrow mountain ridge nearly 2,430 meters above sea level, the ruins of Machu Picchu seem almost unreal. Stone terraces cascade down the slopes like giant stairways carved into the mountain itself. Temples and houses built from precisely fitted blocks of granite stand silently against the backdrop of mist-covered peaks. For centuries, this remarkable city remained hidden from the outside world. And even today, many questions about its origins and purpose remain unanswered. Machu Picchu was constructed during the height of the Inca Empire, sometime around the mid-15th century, during the reign of the Inca ruler Pachacuti. At the time, the Incas controlled one of the largest empires in the Americas, stretching across vast regions of modern-day Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. Despite this enormous territory, the Incas left behind relatively few written records. Their civilization relied on an intricate system of oral tradition and knotted cords known as quipu for communication and record-keeping. As a result, many details about their cities and political structures remain unclear. This lack of written documentation has made Machu Picchu one of the most intriguing puzzles in the study of ancient civilizations. The site remained largely unknown to the outside world until 1911, when an American historian named Hiram Bingham arrived in the region while searching for the legendary lost city of Vilcabamba. Guided by local farmers who knew of the ruins, Bingham climbed the steep mountain slopes and emerged onto the overgrown terraces of Machu Picchu. What he discovered astonished him. Hidden beneath thick vegetation were the remains of a vast stone city. More than 200 structures were scattered across the rich houses, temples, plazas, and ceremonial spaces, all built with remarkable precision. Many of the buildings were constructed using enormous granite blocks cut and shaped to fit together perfectly without the use of mortar. The stones were so precisely carved that even today it is difficult to slide a thin blade between them. This technique, known as ashlar masonry, was one of the defining features of Inca architecture. But how the Incas achieved such precision remains a topic of debate. The granite used to build Machu Picchu was incredibly hard. Shaping it into perfectly fitted blocks using only stone and bronze tools would have required immense patience and skill. Some researchers believe the builders used a process of grinding and polishing the stone surfaces until they fit together seamlessly. Others suggest that wooden wedges soaked in water may have been used to split the rock along natural fractures. Whatever methods were used, the results were extraordinary. The buildings of Machu Picchu have endured earthquakes, heavy rains, and centuries of exposure to the elements. Yet many of the stone walls remain standing almost exactly as they were built more than 500 years ago. One of the most impressive features of the city is its terraced agricultural system. Hundreds of stone terraces cover the slopes surrounding the settlement. These terraces served multiple purposes. They created flat areas for growing crops such as maize and potatoes, which were essential to the Inca diet. But they also functioned as a sophisticated drainage system. Beneath each terrace lies a carefully constructed layer of gravel and soil that allows rainwater to drain away efficiently. This prevented landslides and erosion on the steep mountainside. In addition to agriculture, the Incas developed an advanced water management system within the city itself. A natural spring located above the settlement supplied fresh water to Machu Picchu. Engineers constructed a network of stone channels that carried water through the city, supplying fountains and bathing areas. These channels were carefully angled to maintain a steady flow. Even today, water still moves through parts of the ancient system. The precision of this hydraulic design suggests that the builders possessed a deep understanding of engineering and environmental planning. But despite these impressive achievements, the true purpose of Machu Picchu remains uncertain. One popular theory is that the city served as a royal estate for Emperor Pachacuti. According to this interpretation, Machu Picchu may have been a retreat where the Inca ruler and his court could escape from the political center of the empire. The surrounding mountains would have provided both protection and isolation. Another possibility is that Machu Picchu functioned as a religious and ceremonial center. Several structures within the city appear to have been designed for ritual purposes. Among the most famous is the Temple of the Sun, a semicircular structure built on a natural rock formation. Its windows are carefully aligned with the movements of the sun during important astronomical events. During the winter solstice, sunlight enters the temple through a specific window, illuminating a sacred stone inside. Nearby stands another intriguing monument known as the Intihuatana stone. This carved rock pillar is believed to have functioned as an astronomical instrument. The name Intihuatana roughly translates to hitching post of the sun. Researchers believe the stone may have been used to track the position of the sun during different times of the year. Such observations would have been important for the Incas, whose agricultural calendar depended heavily on understanding seasonal cycles. But Machu Picchu also contains evidence of everyday life. Excavations of uncovered kitchens, storage buildings, and living quarters that would have housed residents of the city. Archaeologists have identified areas where artisans may have crafted tools and pottery. Human remains discovered at the site suggest that the population may have consisted of a diverse group of individuals, possibly drawn from different parts of the Inca Empire. This raises another intriguing question. If Machu Picchu was a royal estate, why were so many people from distant regions living there? Some researchers believe the city may have served as a training or ceremonial center for priests and scholars. Others suggest it could have been a strategic outpost along important mountain routes connecting different parts of the empire. Yet another mystery surrounds the abandonment of Machu Picchu. Unlike many ancient cities, Machu Picchu shows little evidence of destruction or violent conflict. Instead, the site appears to have been gradually deserted. Historians believe the city may have been abandoned around the time of the Spanish conquest of the Inca Empire in the 16th century. As Spanish forces advanced through the Andes, many Inca settlements were deserted. Some communities fled deeper into the mountains. Others were destroyed by disease brought by European contact. Yet Machu Picchu itself was never discovered by the Spanish. Hidden high in the mountains and surrounded by dense forest, the city remained largely untouched. Over time, vegetation grew across the terraces and buildings. The stone walls became covered in moss and vines, and the once bustling city slowly faded from memory. For nearly 400 years, Machu Picchu remained hidden from the outside world. Local farmers living in the region knew of the ruins, but few outsiders ever visited the site. It was not until Bingham's expedition in 1911 that the city began to capture global attention. Today, Machu Picchu is recognized as one of the most remarkable archaeological sites ever discovered. Each year, hundreds of thousands of visitors travel to the Andes to witness the city above the clouds. Yet despite decades of research, many aspects of Machu Picchu remain mysterious. Why was such an elaborate city built in such a remote location? What ceremonies took place within its temples, and what caused its inhabitants to leave behind one of the most beautiful cities of the ancient world? Standing on the terraces of Machu Picchu, surrounded by towering mountains and drifting clouds, it is easy to understand why the site continues to inspire wonder. The stone walls remain, the temples still face the rising sun, and the mysteries of this lost Inca city continue to echo across the Andes, waiting for the day when the full story of Machu Picchu may finally be revealed. The giant figures of the desert, the Nazca Lines. In the southern deserts of Peru, where the landscape stretches endlessly beneath a blazing sun and rain rarely falls, there exists one of the most puzzling creations of the ancient world. From ground level, the terrain appears barren and unremarkable. Dusty plains extend for miles in every direction, broken only by distant hills and dry riverbeds. But high above this desert floor, visible only from the sky, lies a vast network of enormous shapes etched into the earth. Perfectly straight lines that stretch across the desert for kilometers. Gigantic drawings of animals, plants, and geometric patterns. Figures so large that some measure over 300 meters long. These mysterious images are known as the Nazca Lines, and for nearly a century, they have remained one of archaeology's greatest enigmas. The Nazca Lines are located in the Nazca Desert, roughly 400 kilometers south of Lima. The region is one of the driest places on Earth. Some areas receive only a few millimeters of rain each year. This extreme dryness has helped preserve the lines for more than 2,000 years. Unlike many ancient structures that deteriorate over time, the Nazca Lines have remained remarkably intact. But how were these enormous images created? The method used by the ancient Nazca people was surprisingly simple. The desert surface is covered with small reddish stones that have darkened over time due to oxidation. By removing these stones, the builders exposed the lighter-colored soil beneath. This created clear, visible lines that contrast sharply with the surrounding ground. In most cases, the lines are only about 10 to 15 centimeters deep, yet they form shapes that stretch across vast areas. The true scale of these designs becomes apparent only when viewed from above. This is one of the most puzzling aspects of the Nazca Lines. The Nazca civilization existed between roughly 200 BC and 600 AD, long before the invention of flight. From ground level, it would have been almost impossible to see the full shapes of the figures being created. So how did the builders design such enormous images with such accuracy? Some researchers believe the Nazca people used simple tools such as ropes, stakes, and measuring techniques to map out the lines. Experiments conducted by archaeologists have shown that it is possible to create large-scale geometric figures using basic surveying methods. Teams of workers could have marked key points across the desert floor and then connected them using ropes to maintain straight lines. But even with these techniques, the precision of many figures remains impressive. The Nazca Lines include more than 800 straight lines, 300 geometric shapes, and around 70 animal and plant figures, often referred to as geoglyphs. Among the most famous images are a giant hummingbird, a monkey with a spiraling tail, a spider, a condor, and even a mysterious figure sometimes called the astronaut because of its human-like shape and raised hand. Each figure displays a unique style and level of detail. The hummingbird, for example, measures roughly 90 meters in length. The monkey stretches more than 100 meters across the desert floor. The condor spans nearly 130 meters from wingtip to wingtip. Yet despite their enormous size, the lines forming these shapes are surprisingly delicate. Walking across them could easily damage the designs. Fortunately, the desert climate has helped preserve them for centuries. Because the region experiences very little wind and rain, the lines have remained largely unchanged since their creation. But the greatest mystery of the Nazca Lines is not how they were built. It is why they were built. For decades, researchers have debated the purpose of these enormous drawings. One of the earliest theories suggested that the lines may have served as a kind of astronomical calendar. In the mid-20th century, a German mathematician named Maria Raiche spent years studying the Nazca Lines. She believed that many of the lines were aligned with the positions of the sun, moon, and certain stars during important times of the year. According to her theory, the Nazca people may have used the lines to track celestial movements and determine the best times for planting and harvesting crops. However, later studies have shown that many of the alignments appear to be coincidental. While some lines do point toward astronomical events, the majority do not display consistent patterns related to the sky. Another popular explanation involves religious rituals. Some archaeologists believe the lines may have functioned as sacred pathways used during ceremonial processions. Participants may have walked along the lines as part of rituals meant to communicate with gods or spirits. This theory is supported by the discovery of small offerings found near some of the lines, including pottery fragments and shells. These objects may have been left behind during religious ceremonies, but perhaps the most widely accepted theory today relates to water. In the extremely dry environment of the Nazca Desert, water would have been the most precious resource for survival. Some researchers believe the Nazca Lines may have been connected to rituals intended to bring rain or ensure the availability of underground water sources. The Nazca people constructed a sophisticated system of underground aqueducts, known as puquios, which allowed them to access groundwater and irrigate their fields. Some of the lines appear to lead toward these aqueducts or toward nearby mountains. In many ancient cultures, mountains were believed to be the homes of powerful spirits responsible for controlling rain and weather. The Nazca people may have created the lines as offerings or messages directed toward these mountain deities. But even this explanation does not fully account for the complexity and variety of the figures. Why create enormous animal shapes that can only be fully seen from the sky? Why draw hundreds of straight lines across the desert floor? And why did the Nazca people invest so much effort into constructing designs that could not easily be appreciated from ground level? Over the years, the mysterious nature of the Nazca lines has inspired countless theories. Some have suggested that the lines were created as landing strips for extraterrestrial visitors, a claim popularized in the 1960s by writers interested in ancient astronaut theories. However, there is no credible evidence to support such ideas. More recent research has provided new insights into how the lines may have evolved over time. Archaeologists now believe the Nazca lines were not created all at once. Instead, different groups of people likely contributed to the designs over several centuries. Earlier cultures in the region, such as the Paracas civilization, also created geoglyphs on nearby hillsides. The Nazca people may have inherited this tradition and expanded it on a much larger scale. Recent discoveries using drones and satellite imaging have revealed new geoglyphs that were previously hidden beneath layers of sand. Some of these newly identified figures are smaller and more intricate than the well-known designs. These discoveries suggest that the Nazca landscape may contain hundreds of additional drawings waiting to be uncovered. Yet despite modern technology and decades of research, the full meaning behind the Nazca lines remains elusive. They represent an enormous investment of time, effort, and creativity. They were clearly important to the people who made them, but the exact beliefs and traditions that inspired their creation have been lost to history. Today, aircraft fly above the desert, allowing visitors to view the shapes from the sky. From that vantage point, the designs finally reveal their true scale and beauty. The hummingbird spreads its wings across the sand. The spider stretches its delicate legs across the desert floor. The monkey curls its spiral tail into a perfect loop. Each figure is a silent message left behind by an ancient civilization, a message whose meaning has faded over time. Yet the Nazca lines remain, etched permanently into the desert landscape, one of the most extraordinary and mysterious works of art ever created by human hands. The Island of Stone Giants, the mystery of Easter Island. In the vast emptiness of the Pacific Ocean, more than 3,500 kilometers from the coast of South America, lies one of the most remote inhabited islands on Earth. Known today as Easter Island or Rapa Nui to its native inhabitants, this small volcanic island has long fascinated explorers, historians, and archaeologists alike. At first glance, the island appears rugged and windswept. Rolling hills of grass stretch across the landscape, broken only by scattered volcanic craters and rocky cliffs that plunge into the surrounding sea. But scattered across this lonely island stand hundreds of enormous stone statues. Some stare silently out toward the ocean. Others gaze inland across the empty plains. These statues are known as moai, and they are among the most mysterious creations of the ancient world. The moai are unlike anything else ever built by human hands. Carved from volcanic rock, these massive figures often stand between 4 and 10 meters tall, with some weighing more than 80 tons. Their elongated faces, prominent brows, and solemn expressions give them an almost otherworldly appearance. Some statues wear large cylindrical stone hats known as pukao, which were carved from a different type of red volcanic stone. Altogether, archaeologists have identified nearly 900 moai scattered across the island. Many stand upright on ceremonial stone platforms called ahu, while others lie unfinished in quarries or abandoned along ancient pathways. The question that has puzzled researchers for centuries is simple. Why were these giant statues built? And how did the people of such a remote island manage to create and transport them? The history of Easter Island begins with the arrival of Polynesian settlers who are believed to have reached the island sometime between 800 and 1200 AD. These early settlers arrived by canoe after navigating thousands of kilometers across the open Pacific Ocean. Their journey remains one of the most impressive feats of ancient navigation. Using only knowledge of the stars, ocean currents, and wind patterns, Polynesian sailors were able to explore and settle islands scattered across the largest ocean on Earth. When they first arrived at Rapa Nui, the island looked very different from the landscape seen today. Archaeological evidence suggests that the island was once covered with dense forests of palm trees. These forests provided timber for building canoes, houses, and tools. The island's fertile soil also allowed early settlers to grow crops such as sweet potatoes, bananas, and taro. For generations, the population of Rapa Nui grew and flourished, but at some point, the culture of the island began to focus heavily on the creation of the moai. Most of the statues were carved from volcanic tuff found in a quarry at Rano Raraku, a crater located on the eastern side of the island. This quarry became the primary production site for the statues. Even today, hundreds of partially finished moai remain embedded in the slopes of the crater, frozen in various stages of completion. Some appear to be emerging from the rock as if they were being sculpted directly from the mountainside. Carving a single moai was an enormous undertaking. Workers used stone tools to carefully chip away at the volcanic rock, shaping the statues with remarkable precision. Once the front of the statue was completed, it was separated from the bedrock and prepared for transport. But moving a statue that weighed several tons across the island was no easy task. For many years, researchers believed the moai were transported using wooden sledges or rollers made from tree trunks. According to this theory, teams of workers would have dragged the statues across the island using ropes. However, this method would have required a large supply of timber, something that eventually disappeared from the island. More recent experiments have suggested an alternative possibility. Some archaeologists believe the statues may have been walked across the island. By attaching ropes to the sides of the statue and rocking it gently from side to side, teams of workers could gradually move the moai forward in an upright position. This technique may explain why many statues were found along ancient pathways leading from the quarry to ceremonial platforms. But even if the statues could be moved in this way, the effort required would have been enormous. Constructing nearly 900 statues would have demanded a highly organized society with skilled artisans and strong leadership, which raises an even deeper question. What purpose did the moai serve? Most archaeologists believe the statues represented important ancestors or leaders of the island's communities. Placed on ceremonial platforms facing inland, the moai may have symbolized the spiritual presence of these ancestors watching over their descendants. The larger the statue, the greater the prestige of the clan that built it. Competition between different groups on the island may have driven the creation of increasingly larger statues. Yet the construction of so many moai may also have contributed to one of the island's greatest tragedies. At some point in its history, the forests of Easter Island disappeared. Pollen analysis from lake sediments suggests that the island's palm trees were gradually cut down over several centuries. The wood was likely used for building houses, transporting statues, and making tools. But once the forests were gone, the island's ecosystem began to collapse. Without trees to hold the soil in place, erosion increased. Crop yields declined. Canoes could no longer be built for fishing or long-distance travel. As resources became scarce, conflict may have broken out among the island's inhabitants. Evidence suggests that many of the moai were eventually toppled and abandoned. Some statues were deliberately knocked from their platforms during periods of social unrest. By the time European explorers first arrived at Easter Island in 1722, the once thriving statue-building culture had largely collapsed. Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen, who gave the island its modern name, reported seeing many statues standing along the coast, but over the following decades, additional visitors found the island in a state of decline. Population numbers had decreased, and many of the statues had fallen. Yet despite these challenges, the culture of Rapa Nui did not disappear entirely. The descendants of the island's original inhabitants continue to live there today, preserving traditions and stories passed down through generations. In recent decades, efforts have been made to restore some of the fallen moai. Several statues have been re-erected on their platforms using modern archaeological techniques. These restorations provide a glimpse into how the island may have appeared during the height of its statue-building era. But even with centuries of research, many mysteries surrounding the moai remain unsolved. How exactly were the largest statues transported across the island? What rituals accompanied their construction and placement? And why did the society that created them ultimately collapse? Easter Island stands today as both a marvel of human creativity and a cautionary tale about the delicate balance between civilization and environment. The moai still watch silently across the island, their expressions unchanged after hundreds of years, guardians of a culture that achieved extraordinary feats and left behind one of the most haunting archaeological mysteries in the world. Göbekli Tepe, the temple that rewrote human history in the dry hills of southeastern Turkey, near the modern city of Thanlirva, lies a site that has forced archaeologists to rethink the very origins of human civilization. At first glance, the hill does not appear extraordinary. It rises gently above the surrounding farmland, covered in grass and scattered stones. But beneath this quiet mound lies one of the most astonishing archaeological discoveries ever made: a complex of massive stone pillars arranged in circular formations. Monuments carved more than 11,000 years ago, long before the invention of pottery, metal tools, or even agriculture as we know it. This site is known as Göbekli Tepe, and its discovery has completely transformed our understanding of early human societies. For much of the 20th century, historians believed that civilization followed a simple progression. First, humans learned to farm. Agriculture allowed communities to settle in one place. Permanent settlements led to the development of religion, architecture, and organized societies. In other words, the common assumption was that farming came first and large cultural monuments came later. But Göbekli Tepe appears to challenge that entire sequence, because the monumental structures at the site were built thousands of years before the earliest known farming villages. The story of Göbekli Tepe began in 1994, when a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt visited the region to investigate a hillside that local farmers had long believed contained ancient ruins. Fragments of limestone pillars had been discovered in the soil, suggesting that something important lay buried beneath the mound. But when Schmidt and his team began excavating the site, they quickly realized they had uncovered something far more significant than expected. Beneath the surface were enormous T-shaped stone pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons. These pillars were arranged in large circular enclosures with pairs of taller stones standing at the center of each ring. The structures were clearly deliberate. The pillars had been carved with remarkable skill. Many were decorated with detailed relief carvings of animals: lions, snakes, foxes, birds, and wild boars. Some carvings appear almost lifelike, capturing the movement and posture of the creatures with impressive precision. But perhaps the most striking feature of the pillars is their shape. Each pillar resembles a stylized human figure. The flat surfaces form what could be interpreted as shoulders and arms. In some cases, carvings of hands appear along the sides of the stone. This has led some archaeologists to suggest that the pillars may represent ancient human-like beings, perhaps spiritual figures or deities. If this interpretation is correct, Göbekli Tepe may represent one of the oldest known temples in the world. Yet the people who built it were not farmers. Archaeological evidence suggests they were still hunter-gatherers, living by hunting wild animals and gathering plants. This raises an astonishing question. How could a society without agriculture or permanent settlements organize the labor required to build such monumental structures? Constructing the stone pillars would have required quarrying massive blocks of limestone from nearby bedrock. Workers then had to shape the pillars using stone tools before transporting them to the construction site. Even moving a single pillar weighing 20 tons would have required dozens of people. Yet the site contains dozens of these pillars, arranged into multiple enclosures. Clearly, the builders possessed a high level of social organization and cooperation. Some researchers believe the site may have functioned as a regional gathering place. Groups of hunter-gatherers from different areas may have traveled to Göbekli Tepe during certain times of the year to participate in rituals, feasts, or ceremonies. Such gatherings could have strengthened social bonds between different communities. Large communal events may also explain another intriguing discovery made at the site. Excavations have uncovered enormous quantities of animal bones, particularly from wild gazelles and other game animals. This suggests that large-scale feasts may have taken place at Göbekli Tepe. Hundreds of people could have gathered here, hunting animals and sharing food during religious celebrations. If this theory is correct, Göbekli Tepe may represent an early form of ritual center, where spiritual traditions helped unite scattered groups of people. But perhaps the most surprising aspect of the site is what happened to it. After centuries of activity, the builders of Göbekli Tepe did something unexpected. They buried the entire complex. The stone enclosures were deliberately filled with layers of soil, rubble, and debris. Pillars were covered, walls were buried, and the structures disappeared beneath the ground. This process was not the result of natural erosion. Archaeologists believe the burial was intentional. But why would a society go to the enormous effort of constructing such monumental structures, only to bury them later? Some researchers believe the burial may have been part of a ritual practice marking the end of the site's use. Others suggest that changing cultural traditions may have led people to abandon the older temple complex. Another possibility is that the shift toward agriculture and permanent settlements altered the social structure of the region. As farming communities began to appear nearby, the need for a large ceremonial gathering site may have diminished. Eventually, the memory of Göbekli Tepe faded. Over thousands of years, the buried structures remained hidden beneath the earth. Grass grew across the mound. Farmers plowed the land above it, and the world forgot that one of the oldest temples ever built lay beneath the soil. Only a small portion of Göbekli Tepe has been excavated so far. Archaeologists estimate that less than 10% of the site has been explored. Ground-penetrating radar suggests that many more enclosures may still lie buried beneath the hill. Each new excavation reveals additional carvings, structures, and artifacts that deepen the mystery. What religious beliefs inspired the construction of these monuments? What stories did the builders tell about the animals carved into the pillars? And why did the site hold such importance for the people who gathered there thousands of years ago? Göbekli Tepe continues to challenge our understanding of early human history. For generations, historians believed that large-scale architecture and organized religion appeared only after the development of agriculture. But Göbekli Tepe suggests the opposite may be true. It may have been religious belief itself that brought people together in large groups long before farming societies emerged. In other words, the desire to build temples may have helped drive the development of civilization itself. Today, Göbekli Tepe stands as one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the modern era. The stone pillars rise once again beneath the open sky, their carvings still visible after more than 11,000 years. They remind us that the story of human civilization is far older and far more complex than we once imagined. And beneath the remaining layers of earth, many more secrets of this ancient temple may still be waiting to be uncovered. The lost city beneath the sea. The mystery of Dwarka, along the western coast of India, where the waters of the Arabian Sea crash against the shores of Gujarat, lies a mystery that has fascinated historians, archaeologists, and explorers for decades. Beneath the waves, hidden below layers of sand and sediment, are the remains of what some researchers believe may be one of the oldest submerged cities in the world. This mysterious site is associated with the legendary city of Dwarka. According to ancient Indian text, Dwarka was once a magnificent coastal city ruled by the deity King Krishna. The city is described in detail in sacred scriptures such as the Mahabharata, which recounts that Dwarka was built as a grand fortified capital filled with palaces, gardens, and bustling streets. But the story of Dwarka does not end with its creation. The texts also describe a dramatic and mysterious event. After Krishna's death, the city is said to have sunk beneath the sea, swallowed by the ocean itself. For centuries, many historians considered this story to be purely mythological, a symbolic tale, rather than a real historical event. But in the late 20th century, a series of underwater discoveries began to challenge that assumption. Marine archaeologists exploring the waters near the modern town of Dwarka discovered stone structures resting on the seabed. These structures included walls, rectangular foundations, and large blocks that appeared to have been shaped by human hands. Even more intriguing were the discoveries of stone anchors, pottery fragments, and other artifacts scattered across the underwater site. These objects suggested that the area may once have been a busy ancient harbor. The possibility that a submerged city existed beneath the waters of the Arabian Sea immediately captured the attention of researchers around the world. But how old was this underwater settlement? And could it really be connected to the legendary city described in ancient texts? Some early studies suggested that the submerged structures might date back to around 1500 to 2000 BC, placing them within the time frame of several early civilizations in the region. However, other researchers have proposed even earlier dates, suggesting that parts of the site could be far older. One of the most important discoveries came in the form of stone anchors found scattered across the seabed. These anchors resemble similar designs used by ancient maritime traders throughout the Indian Ocean. Their presence indicates that the site may have once functioned as a major port city, connecting trade routes between India, the Middle East, and East Africa. If Dwarka truly served as a harbor city, it may have played a crucial role in early maritime commerce. Ships carrying spices, textiles, metals, and other valuable goods may have once docked at its shores. Merchants from distant lands may have passed through its markets, but the structures discovered underwater raise many questions. Some appear to form straight lines resembling walls or streets. Others resemble platforms or building foundations. Yet underwater archaeology presents unique challenges. Over thousands of years, ocean currents can shift stones, bury structures beneath sand, or scatter artifacts across large areas. This makes it difficult to determine whether the structures represent an organized city or simply natural formations. To investigate further, archaeologists have used sonar mapping, underwater photography, and diving expeditions to study the seabed. These technologies have revealed what appear to be rectangular patterns that could represent human-made structures. Some researchers believe these may be the remains of docks, defensive walls, or building foundations. But the most intriguing question remains: how could an entire city sink beneath the ocean? Geologists studying the region suggest that changes in sea level may provide part of the answer. At the end of the last ice age, around 10,000 years ago, global sea levels began rising as glaciers melted. Coastal settlements built near ancient shorelines may have gradually been submerged as the ocean expanded inland. In addition, the western coast of India lies near several tectonic fault zones. Earthquakes, or shifts in the Earth's crust, could have caused sections of land to sink or collapse into the sea. Such events have occurred in many parts of the world throughout history. For example, the ancient Egyptian city of Heracleion was discovered beneath the Mediterranean Sea after sinking due to geological changes. Similarly, parts of the legendary city of Alexandria now lie beneath the waters of the Egyptian coastline. Could Dwarka have experienced a similar fate? It is certainly possible. Yet the connection between the underwater ruins and the legendary city described in the Mahabharata remains a subject of debate. The epic text describes Dwarka as a city of immense grandeur, filled with golden palaces, wide streets, and massive gates. While underwater discoveries suggest the presence of ancient structures, the full scale of such a city has not yet been confirmed. Still, the possibility that ancient myths may contain elements of historical truth continues to intrigue researchers. Across many cultures, stories of lost cities swallowed by the sea appear again and again. The Greek legend of Atlantis, the sunken city of Pavlopetri in Greece, and submerged settlements discovered in Japan and the Caribbean all hint at a time when rising oceans reshaped human civilizations. Perhaps these stories were passed down through generations as memories of real events, memories of coastal cities lost to natural disasters or changing climates. Another mystery surrounding Dwarka involves the artifacts recovered from the seabed. Some pottery fragments and stone tools appear consistent with ancient Indian cultures, but determining the exact age of underwater artifacts is often difficult. Carbon dating works best with organic materials such as wood or bone. Stone structures themselves cannot easily be dated without associated materials. As a result, the timeline of the submerged ruins remains uncertain. Further research may provide clearer answers in the future. Modern technologies such as underwater drones, advanced sonar scanning, and sediment analysis are helping archaeologists explore the seabed with greater precision than ever before. Each new expedition reveals additional clues about what lies hidden beneath the waves. Some researchers believe there may be multiple layers of settlements beneath the ocean floor. Over thousands of years, earlier coastal communities may have been buried beneath sediment before later civilizations built new structures above them. If this is the case, the underwater region near Dwarka may contain a complex archaeological record spanning several different periods of history. Yet, much of the site remains unexplored. Strong ocean currents, limited visibility, and shifting sands make underwater excavation extremely challenging. Entire sections of the seabed may still conceal structures waiting to be discovered. For now, the mystery of Dwarka continues to capture the imagination of both scientists and storytellers. Was there once a grand coastal city that disappeared beneath the waves? Did ancient myths preserve the memory of a real catastrophe that reshaped the shoreline, or are the underwater structures simply remnants of smaller settlements gradually lost to rising seas? Perhaps future discoveries will provide the answers, or perhaps Dwarka will remain one of the many mysteries where legend and archaeology intersect. What is certain is that the oceans still hold countless secrets. Across the world's coastlines, ancient harbors, villages, and cities may lie hidden beneath the water, places where people once lived, traded, and built communities long before modern history began. And somewhere beneath the shifting sands of the Arabian Sea, the true story of Dwarka may still be waiting to emerge from the depths. The echoes of forgotten civilizations across deserts, mountains, jungles, islands, and hidden valleys, the remnants of ancient civilization still stand quietly beneath the sky, stone walls weathered by time, temples buried beneath layers of soil, cities swallowed by forests, and monuments so vast and mysterious that even modern science struggles to fully explain them. Throughout this journey, we have traveled across thousands of years of human history, from the fortified walls of Los Millares to the earliest farming society at Mergar, from the towering Broch of Gurnes in the windswept islands of Scotland to the massive Cyclopean walls of Rajgir in India. We explored forgotten temple cities hidden deep in the Cambodian jungle, stood before ancient burial chambers beneath the sacred hills of Ireland, and uncovered the royal tombs of Alacahoyuk in the heart of Anatolia. We walked among the mysterious stone circles of Clavacairns, climbed the rocky temples of Purparikon, and stood beneath the endless rows of standing stones at Karnak. We journeyed through the deserts of the American Southwest to the monumental structures of Chaco Canyon, crossed into the red cliffs of Petra, and descended into the underground labyrinth of Derinkuyu. High in the Andes, we explored the breathtaking terraces of Machu Picchu. In the barren plains of Peru, we looked down upon the vast drawings of the Nazca lines. On a lonely island in the Pacific, we stood face to face with the silent stone giants of Easter Island. And finally, we traveled back more than 11,000 years to the mysterious stone pillars of Göbekli Tepe, a site that has rewritten everything we thought we knew about the origins of civilization. Each of these places tells a story, but each story also leaves behind unanswered questions, because the deeper we dig into the past, the more we realize how much we still don't understand. For centuries, historians believed that ancient societies were simple and limited in their abilities, that true technological and architectural sophistication only emerged during the later stages of civilization. But the monuments we have explored suggest something very different. They reveal that even the earliest human societies possessed extraordinary creativity, intelligence, and determination. They could move stones weighing dozens of tons. They could align temples with the movements of the sun and stars. They could build cities high in the mountains, carve monuments from cliffs, and create entire worlds beneath the ground. And they did all of this without modern machines, computers, or advanced technology. Instead, they relied on cooperation, on shared belief systems, on traditions passed down through generations, on knowledge that we are only beginning to rediscover. Yet perhaps the most fascinating aspect of these ancient sites is the fact that many of them were eventually abandoned. The people who built them vanished from history. Their languages faded, their rituals disappeared, their knowledge was lost. In many cases, the monuments themselves were buried beneath sand, jungle, or earth. Why did this happen? In some places, climate change may have forced communities to migrate. In others, shifting trade routes or political conflicts may have led to the decline of once powerful cities. Natural disasters, disease, and environmental collapse may also have played roles in the disappearance of entire civilizations. But even with modern research techniques, satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, DNA analysis, and advanced archaeology, many of these mysteries remain unsolved. The truth is that history is not a completed puzzle. It is a story still being written. Every year, archaeologists uncover new discoveries that reshape our understanding of the ancient world. Hidden cities are found beneath jungles. Forgotten structures emerge from beneath desert sands. Ancient DNA reveals connections between cultures once believed to be unrelated. And sites like Göbekli Tepe remind us that the roots of civilization may stretch much further into the past than we ever imagined. Some researchers now believe that many ancient cultures possessed knowledge that was gradually lost over time. Others argue that we have simply underestimated the ingenuity of our ancestors. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. What is certain is that the past still holds countless secrets. Across the world, thousands of ancient sites remain unexplored. Some lie beneath dense forests. Others rest beneath modern cities. Many more are buried beneath layers of earth, waiting quietly for the day they will be rediscovered. The story of humanity is far older and far more mysterious than we often realize, and the ruins we see today are only fragments of a much larger narrative. Each stone monument is a message sent forward through time, a message from people who lived, worked, believed, and dreamed thousands of years before us. People who built extraordinary things. People who shaped the foundations of the world we now inhabit. Yet they left behind no written explanations, no instructions, only clues carved into stone. And it is up to us to piece together the story. Perhaps one day new discoveries will reveal the answers to some of the questions we have explored. Perhaps hidden chambers will be uncovered beneath ancient ruins. Perhaps buried cities will emerge from beneath the earth. Or perhaps some mysteries will remain forever beyond our reach. And maybe that is part of what makes these places so fascinating, because the unknown invites us to keep exploring, to keep asking questions, to keep searching for the forgotten chapters of our shared human story. But now, the question passes to you. Which of these ancient mysteries fascinated you the most? Was it the underground city of Derinkuyu, the giant figures of the Nazca Desert, the lost Inca city of Machu Picchu, or perhaps the mysterious temple complex of Gobekli Tepe? Let us know in the comments below. Your thoughts and theories might inspire the next exploration into the mysteries of the ancient world. And if you enjoyed this journey through some of the most puzzling archaeological discoveries in history, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because there are still countless mysteries waiting to be uncovered. From lost cities hidden beneath the ocean, to ancient civilizations buried beneath the sands of time, to secrets carved into stone that humanity has yet to fully understand. History is full of stories that remain untold, and the next discovery could be just around the corner. Until then, keep questioning the past, because the deeper we explore it, the more extraordinary the story of humanity becomes.